The best handling car was E36 at the time. And still to this day, I've driven a lot of those cars that were in that era. And I'm gonna tell you, it is absolutely the best handling car. Some people get very pissy about tuners and they're like, oh, this guy sucks because I went faster with this guy. Okay, but guess what? That guy's tuned 200 cars. People think, oh, I start my car every day and I warm it up, but I don't drive it and I shut it off. That's the worst thing you can do. The best engine design for longevity and reliability is an inline six. Imagine you were teaching somebody's grandmother to drive manual. That's how fast SMG shifts.
Welcome back to another episode of the Street Alpha Podcast. I'm your host, Tukes, and today we're back in New York. If you don't know, I will be moving to Florida pretty soon, so this is going to be my last episode in New York, I believe. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. So I had to get an episode in with Frank again before we left because he had such a great episode last time. So yeah, we're going to cover basically in this video majority of the chassis in the BMW platform. So without further ado, let's give a round of applause for Frank before we start.
Hey, you making beats over there?
I got to do it. Yeah. So appreciate you, man. I know I'm sorry I took a little bit of time setting up as always, but
it's all good, man. It's all love always. And like I said, congratulations on moving down to Florida. I hope it all goes well for you. You know, it's definitely a good change in climate. I got a few friends that moved down south and they like it a lot.
Absolutely.
I just I like the cold sometimes. So
yeah, I'm over it. 33 years of it, I'm over it, bro.
Yeah, I hear you.
Plus, for like cars, it's you can't deny it's just better.
No, you're right. But sometimes I want to break from cars, man. That's true. So I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. So sometimes,
that's true too.
Sometimes you got to take a step back and level out. Pay attention to things that are important in your life. Your family, significant other, kids, whatever you got. Always bring back to zero because that's what's most important. This is fun for us at the end of the day, but beyond that, so I know we were a little scattered last time, a little off topic.
Yeah. So I learned so much more now because it was 11 months ago apparently. So basically a year ago.
You were also starting your build during that time, so like you learned a lot on your own with research and talking to a lot of other guys and stuff.
Almost a year ago. That's insane. So I think I've learned a lot. Not to be a mechanic, but a lot more than I.
No, you should. And being interested in your hobby is always. I encourage it for everybody because the more you know about what you're building, or the more you know about what you're interested in, the better off you are. Yeah. A lot of times people go to shops and they don't know, some of the basics of certain things, and they get taken advantage of by some places.
Absolutely.
And that's unfortunate that it does happen, and we see it. We see it all the time, and it sucks, but people stay informed and do some of your own research. But that doesn't also mean to take everything that you hear from everybody and turn it into 100% truth.
Right. Do your research.
You have to do your own research and come to your own conclusion. You can't let anybody tell you this is the best, this is the worst, and this is what's in between. Because you should take everything with a grain of salt, and that's advice you can use all over your life. Right. Not just into cars. You can take that to the bank.
Yeah, so definitely do your research, guys, and that's one of the biggest reasons why we're doing this podcast right now, because we're going to learn a lot from Frank. So, with that being said, before we get into the earlier years of the BMW, I see your car is in a different state than it was last time we did the podcast.
Yeah, no, last time we were here, it was running, and now it is not. So, unfortunately, I was at an event. I was at Streetcar Takeover in North Carolina. One of my favorite events to go to, probably my favorite event to go to. Those guys, they put a great event together. And I had some overheating issues, and it was pressurizing the cooling system. So I thought, it was the head gasket. So I started taking it apart. And when I took the head off and everything looked clean, I noticed that I had a nice big crack in the block.
Damn.
And in cylinder number 4. Cylinder number 4 had a huge crack from the top right to the bottom. So now I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to, I'll do another block. I'll fix it and put everything back together. Everything else looks really good. And I was on the Pulsar 67, 75. Yeah. And that made just at about 1100 at the tire. And now I think I'm going to switch back to my Boost Lab 78, 75 that I had and, crank it up. Everybody, coming around with their 80 millimeters and stuff like that. That's great, bro. But
80 millimeter. I don't got one.
A lot of people got the 80,
Really?
80
on the street.
Yeah, a lot of people got. Well, that's the thing. Is like they say it's a street car, but
I don't know.
what do? They trailer it to the track and then they drive it there for this much time. They don't actually drive the cars on the street. But no, my goal is to be able to run the 78 and interchange back to the 67 for the street. So I want to run the 78, full tilt, tune it, see how it works,
right?
Run it at the track, whatever. And then I'll drive it on the street maybe once or twice, and then I'll swap it back to the 67 and just load up my old tune and drive the car. A turbo swap ain't that bad.
Yeah.
It's essentially, it might take like 2 or 3 hours. So think like you're changing brakes. I'm changing turbo. But it's nice because I like to put it together with like the same flanges and everything. So like it literally would just like remove and put on. So try to make it like that.
The 76 is that like the limit for like street turbos, you think, for like having a fun street car?
I think a 76 is too big for a street.
I think so too, yeah.
This also depends on what engine you have.
Right.
It depends on your displacement.
Well, in your terms, in inline six.
In the inline six, you have, you can have a 2.5 inline six, like an M50, or actually you can even have a 2.0 inline six, like an M50 or an RB20, or you can go as high as a 4-liter straight six, or even bigger than that. There are huge straight sixes that they spool these turbos like nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
So, it really all depends on your engine.
But in your application.
But at the end of the day, in my application, BMWs in general, it's the other thing. Turbo technology is changing like crazy.
It is. Yeah.
But I remember I was just talking to Goku the other day about this. 10 or 12 years ago, actually, you needed a 76 millimeter to make 1,000. Nowadays, nowadays you can put a 6470 on a car and crank it up, and you might hit the 1,000.
Yeah.
Or the 6870 the new one will absolutely do that.
Right.
So that's like turbo technology is changing so much now. I can't even give you a straight answer because a 76 is essentially these days too big. A 76 will go to, a 76 will make 12, 13. There are some people that push 76 up to 1,400 horsepower with, with some nitrous and all the bells and whistles turned up. But at the end of the day, that's too much horsepower for the street. What are you going to do? If you have a rear-wheel drive car, you are not using it at all. I don't care who you are. I don't care what rear end you got. Oh, I got a 9-inch rear. I got, XYZ. We tubbed the car. I got steamrollers on the back. You're not enjoying that on the street. I know for a fact you're not, So if, I feel like for a street car, I feel like the sweet spot is anything that'll get you right up to like that 1,000 mark.
Yeah.
And then you turn it back a little bit from there.
I agree. That's what I'm going to be at.
That's what I feel like. You're going to blow almost anything out of the water. You're going to, any brand new fast car can pull up next to you and you're going to make them wish you didn't buy that.
Even these new BMWs, like these, with the ZF transmissions.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, even if you have a, even if you have a G80, the cars are fast and they work, but we haven't seen them for that long yet.
Well, I'm talking about on the street.
That's what I'm saying. We haven't seen them for that long. And for a quarter mile car, they're hooked because they're all-wheel drive and they got some weight to them, so they're a little heavy. They're, like I said, they're very good cars, but I'm an enthusiast. I like rowing gears.
Yeah.
And I don't care if the G80 is that fast next to me. I'm going to roll the gears and I'm going to turn my shit up.
You think you can roll the gears and keep up?
With a G80?
Yeah.
How much power is it making?
Usually they're around maybe 1,300 horsepower now.
If you have a 1,200 horsepower G80, it's going to be very difficult to catch that. I still have, I have all-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And, but at the end of the day, without putting an auto or without faceplating the transmission I have, I don't think I could hold a candle at that point.
There's no gear ratio that you can put in the car to keep up, or
you can really try. I mean, I don't see it happening. I just don't. I have a lighter car, and arguably the same, if not a little bit more power. But at the end of the day, it's really all you're fighting traction, and you're shifting the car. So it's like, you're fighting an uphill battle,
right?
But that's why I always give props to when it's due. I love rowing gears and I love cars that are cars that are manual. Don't get me wrong, a lot of this auto stuff is really cool, but for me, rowing gears is my thing. You go to the drag strip and most of the cars are automatic. I want to build a drag car that is auto, yes, because it's more consistent. And at the end of the day, you break less parts. But then you have cars that don't have that option. You don't have that option in in Honda drag racing. Everything is manual.
Yeah.
They have like the air shifters and they have some stuff like that, but for the most part, everything is either a sequential up down or an H pattern.
Right.
But for me personally, I like seeing an H pattern at the drag strip until they money shift the car, and then I look at the in-car video and they were holding the shifter wrong. That's never fun. You
can tell how somebody's shifting just by the in-car video. Like the angle, because those GoPros be positioned.
Listen, if someone is driving the car and they're holding the shifter like this,
like gripping it,
Pause. Literally like that. Pause. If they're holding the shifter like this, and you see them go 1, 2, they're gonna go right back into 1. They're gonna 1-2-1 the car. Or 2-3-2 the car because they're holding the shifter wrong.
Right? This
is not theory. This is an absolute fact.
Okay.
You're not supposed to shift a car going like this. You're not supposed to shift a car like this. Okay. You're supposed to, when you go into first gear, you're supposed to hold the shifter like this. You're supposed to go first, second, third, fourth. That's what you're supposed to do. But then when you got people that go, and then they money shift the car, and then they go, oh, my lockout didn't work. Or, oh, K-Series transmissions are garbage and, the other linkage is better. No, bro, you just weren't holding the shifter right. And it's always the brolic guys that are just, I know I can shift better and faster than anybody. I'm sure that's not the case, bro.
So is there a school you can go to learn how to shift?
Yeah, you can go to the Frank Ramos driving school. So,
no, he actually
this
had
stuff
a school.
is all. I read this stuff on forums. When I was growing up as a kid, and I'm looking into cars. Yeah, pretty much. I was, I was looking online, and I was like, I was super curious. I learned. My father taught me how to drive stick at 12, 13 years old, and I learned, but I didn't know these things. And then you read about grassroots motorsports, you read about how to shift faster and stuff like that. I forget what it was. It was a company. It was a BMW company.
Okay.
That they made short shifters, and then somebody was complaining that the shifter was notchy, and they're like, oh, when I try to shift it fast, it doesn't go into gear properly or whatever. The shifter is garbage. But then they posted up a video, and this was like in the first days of YouTube, or like Street Fire, where like videos online were not a thing.
Yeah.
And you see him holding the shifter, and he's holding it, he's like gripping the shifter like that. And it's, he's fighting the tranny the entire time. And then I remember the shifter company had posted a video and like a tutorial on how to shift. And they're like, this is how you're supposed to shift. And then a bunch of the old school guys who do like, they do hyperdrive events, like circuit track racing and stuff. They respond like, a bunch of these guys were on the forums. They would respond like, this is how you're supposed to drive. You're not supposed to drive like that. You're supposed to hold the shifter like this, because if you're sideways and the car's spinning, and also with the bushings and stuff that the car has with the transmission, it can move when the car's doing weird things. Mm-hmm. So you'll miss a gear because of that. And naturally, your body wants to pull. If you're holding a shifter like this, your body wants to pull whatever towards you.
Right.
So to go to those middle gears, you have to go away from you, because if not, you're gonna. Okay, if I shift into fifth, who cares?
Yeah.
Whatever. I missed fifth. I missed third. I went to fifth. All right, whatever. I didn't blow my engine up. I didn't money shift the car. I didn't float the valves to hell. So people should take it easy and not try to rip the shifters out of their car, and take care of it a little bit, because that's your baby at the end of the day. You can hate it all you want, but that's the car that's gonna get you from here to there.
Right. So if you guys are interested in learning how to shift, Frank Ramos driving school.
If you want to learn how to shift, you gotta go to my boy. You gotta go to my boy Tom's driving school. That's the one. Tom Fuentes driving school. He's the one. He could drive anything, bro. That man could drive anything. That's a fact.
All right, so let's get into some BMW history here. A little bit of that, and a lot of the inspiration. Let's go take it back to the early days. Maybe
early days,
60s.
Oh, man,
maybe the 60s. So. There was a lot of engineering happening in the earlier days, right? A lot of
people were trying weird things,
right? And there was this motor called the Apfelbeck motor.
Oh yeah, that one's really cool. The Apfelbeck, it's the Apfelbeck M10. They nicknamed it the baby V8 because it looked like a V8. It's essentially a M10. It's an M10 block, and the cylinder head, it has 8 intake. It's a 16 valve. It's a 16 valve 4-cylinder.
Right.
Okay. So it has 8 intake and 8 exhaust valves. But the intake valves each have their own ITB. So they have their own runners, so they have their own. Well, back then it was a carb, so literally they had their own runners and their own velocity stacks, and then the exhaust had their own headers. So each valve had its own header coming out. So you had, it looked like a V8 because you had 8 runners on the top, and you had 2 manifolds coming out the side. What's really interesting though, you take a race spec 4-cylinder from the 90s or even 2000s. So say you take a Type R 4-cylinder. That engine is like, I think it's like 205 or 210 horsepower. Very, very impressive. But that Apfelbeck engine back then with that design, I think it was something like 280 horse. And this was in the 60s. Yeah. You had a 4-cylinder on whatever fuel they were using during the time, making that much horsepower. Imagine what that thing would do today. Like if you had like all the extra work, like the crazy camshafts and the nitro that people are adding into their cars to make 1 million horsepower on these tiny little engines. Imagine what you could make with that. I feel like that was such a cool design. We'll never see anything of it because it's such a complicated design. It was, the reason they dropped it was because the cylinder head was too complicated. I don't think it would have worked very well in a lot of performance applications. It was really cool to see though. Like, obviously I wasn't around during that time, but like when I was doing research on my own and I saw that engine, I thought it was really, really cool. But the design really came from radial engines, from airplane engines.
Right.
If you ever look into that stuff, radial engines are very cool because they need reliability all the time. Because if your engine goes out and you're flying, you ain't flying no more, bro. Right. They have like a lot of over engineering going on, and they have redundancies on engines like that too. But during that time, that was the engine. But then they had that was the 4-cylinder. But then they had the M30 also. The M30 was around for a long time.
What did the Apfelbeck kind of inspire? Because I wasn't even using.
Oh, that inspired. Well, the next one that they came out with after that was the M12 engine, which that's the one.
Is that an F1 engine?
Yeah, that's part of the 16-valve M12 engine. And then on top of that came the M88 and then the S38 and then all the other, 4-valve stuff that we have today.
But all these were using the same M10 block.
The 4-cylinders, yeah, they were using the same M10 blocks, like the old weathered blocks that they had in the back of the, BMW factories. Right. Beyond F1, there was so much motorsport back then. There's still motorsport today. But something that was really cool about motorsport back then was like there was so many different classes. Yeah. But like you had the Group 5 rally cars, which was the E21. Beautiful car. It's like really, really wide body. The E21 is the first 3 Series. Okay. It's the predecessor to the E30, the one that you like. You like the E30. So the E21, very cool car. They came with an M10 normally. And then the Group 5 rally car came with the M12, which they had it all motor, and then they also had it turbocharged. The all motor versions, they were like, that engine made like 310 or 320 horsepower, all motor 4-cylinder. And then the turbo ones were like 600 or 650. And that was the turbo engine was the one that they ended up using in the Formula One cars during that era. I became a Formula One fan in like the last 3 or 4 years. Okay. But I like to read a lot of history, and I like to, because I have the F1 subscription, I can view all the old races. So like they have a server with all the old races from the 70s, from the 80s. The quality's not the best because they were recorded with a potato. But really cool that I got to see those engines race, and you got to see a lot of legendary F1 drivers drive those cars. But it was interesting because those engines, those 4-cylinder turbo engines, they were also racing all motor V6s at the time. I think it was all motor V6s and turbo 4-cylinders. Like they had like a mix like that. Yeah. But the turbo 4-cylinders, bro, every race you were guaranteed to see one blow up. Every single race. These cars were not reliable at all. They made a ton of power, but they were not reliable at all. In qualifying trim, they claim, I mean, every time you look at the horsepower of the BMW M12 F1 engine, the horsepower goes up. It's like a Google hack. It's like every time you Google it, the horsepower number goes up. But they said in qualifying trim it was over 1,000 horsepower, which from a 4-cylinder is crazy. And they also said that it was like 2 or 3 laps was the limit. After 2 or 3 laps, the engine would just explode. Yeah, rods out, valves fall, whatever. The engines were just toast.
So back then, in order to race in certain levels or classes of motorsports, you would have to have, or they had to have the car available for consumers. Is that?
Yeah, that was a thing. You had a bunch of cars like that, like the Mercedes. I think they had a Cosworth 190E or something like that, where it's like they had to sell like 100 cars or something. I forget the exact number, but you had to sell a certain amount of cars to be able to race that car in the class. And that was super cool back then. Nowadays, you don't see that. You know, like the special edition is like, for example, would be like an M4 CS or an M3 CS.
Right.
Like it's like the special race edition because it's like stripped down. It has less stuff. But like they don't have to sell that so that they can race in a class.
Right.
That I think was like a cool thing that if motorsport has to have a rule like that, they should bring that back. Because that made a lot of cool, you know, niche cars that you couldn't buy. Like, you know, you can't find that stuff. Today, you can't find that stuff.
Yeah.
There's a Lancia. There's a really, really cool Lancia that is super, super impressive. And those cars you had to, they're like minimal sold.
Yeah.
And like Lotuses also. They had a bunch of cars like that were just like, they sold like 15 or 20, whatever, just to meet the requirements to be able to go race the cars. And, you know, that's cool because today you see those cars for sale and they're like millions of dollars.
Yeah. So that's not even a requirement anymore, basically. When F1 or anything like that.
Not F1. That stuff wasn't for F1 because that F1 is like, you know.
What was it?
But like, it was like Group B. Group B rally cars were like the Audi. That was like the Audis where they had the 5-cylinder turbos. That was like their real 5-cylinder turbo era where these cars were so fast they were killing people. Literally. You see videos of like old rally cars and they come over this hill flying and you see the people are just standing in the dirt. And the cars are coming like at 110, 120 miles an hour in the dirt. And people are just like, you see like the Red Sea, like people just part, and the cars flying like right through the middle of them. Insane. People started dying during that stuff. They were like, the cars are too fast, so they turned the cars down.
Wow.
But that was, you know, and then people flying off the cliff and stuff like that. That is, you know, that was a crazy time. That was Group B. But the Group 5 rally cars, that was the you know, that was like hill climb cars and other stuff. But the Group B was a wild time. There's a lot, if you want to look up a lot of like motorsport history, that's big. And then also like Trans Am series in America, that was like a big time too. You had a bunch of cool cars and that stuff. Like you had the 300ZX, those were cool during that time. There was the Z31, not like the Z32 one, but the Z31 was dope. And they had those, you know, Trans Am, Camaro, they had all those cars in those series. And a lot of legendary drivers too. There's like a lot of like, during that time, there was like a lot of racism during that time, which was kind of crazy.
A lot of racism?
Yeah. If you want to look up a really cool documentary about this one driver that was like he had it, bro. Whatever race car drivers have, this guy had it. And I think the documentary was Willie T. Ribs, or like the Willie Ribs documentary, whatever. This guy is a legend, and he drove in so many different classes, and like after driving a few times, or like after driving whatever car he was driving, he would get it like this, and he would pick it up, and he could master like almost whatever he was driving.
Oh damn!
And he was like great in Trans Am series. He tested a Formula One car, but like during that time, it's all British media, you know. And it's like, well, you're gonna bring a black dude from America and race it in Great Britain? Like that wasn't happening,
right?
And then they had him in Indy and they had him in NASCAR and like horrible stuff, bro. Like the stories that these guys were talking about and like the racism was documented. This was real during that time. So like that's something that, you know, obviously is part of history.
I gotta watch that. That seems like
it's a very good documentary. If anyone who wants to see that, it's really I couldn't look away from the camera. I was watching the video. I'm like, I think it was like an hour and a half long, something like that. I couldn't even get up to go away. It was like I had to watch it.
All right, so the M10, right? Let's get back to the M10. The M10 was pretty much the foundation for a lot of the earlier BMWs, right? Especially the E30. So I like the E30. It's one of my favorites, right?
Why is it one of your favorites?
So I'm more into like, well, first off, you ever seen Paid in Full?
Oh, come on.
I don't know.
I'm broke, baby. I don't got no money.
So like those older classic BMWs with like PBS wheels, It's more of an aesthetic thing for me.
Yeah.
I
get that fully.
Yeah.
That's fire. They had a really nice Saab in that movie too.
A Saab, yeah.
The Saab was fire.
The Saab was fire too.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't really know too much about Saabs, but it'd be interesting to kind of to find.
They have some very cool cars. The Saab 9.3 Aero is like a super impressive 4-cylinder turbo engine, bro. It's like downpipe in a tune. It was like the B58 car before the B58, bro. Those cars were making like 350 wheel horsepower on a downpipe in a tune in a 4-cylinder. In like early 2000s, early mid 2000s. It became manual.
Damn.
It was the Aero. So the Aeros were the fast ones for the
right.
Saabs. Really cool cars. And then they had the coolest Saab that they made was a Subaru.
Yeah.
You know, they had the 9, I think that was the 92X. And that was the WRX, like the bug eye, but the Saab version, it looked so much better. That was cool too.
Saabs are always weird looking to me.
Yeah, some of them look kind of weird, but I like the wagons. I always like
wagons,
the hatch or the wagons. Those are cool. I'm kind of a sucker for stuff like that.
Yeah, the wagons were cool. The E30 is one of my favorite BMWs. And
You and a lot of other people, buddy, love E30s.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting though? People who like E30s, or people who, I'm not going to say everybody, but generalization, a lot of people who own E30s or who really, really like E30s don't like E36s. But they skip a generation and then they like E46s.
Why do you think that is? Because I don't like the E36 either.
See, look, exactly what I'm talking about right there. You are prime example. Prime example.
The E36 to me is like an R33. It's like to me.
I fucking love the R33.
I don't like the way it looks.
You said that.
I don't like the way it looks.
I love the way the R33 looks. Who cares about anything else? It's the same driveline from 32 to 33.
Look-wise, yeah.
Same 32 to 34. It's the same driveline.
It's just
literally just a different shape.
The headlights look like they're not complete yet. Like
Car looks good, bro. You're bugging. Car looks good. R32, R33 from the front, from the back, from the side, whatever. R33 is fire. I am a huge fan of R33s.
I just think it's like don't
get me wrong, R32 is hot too, and R34 is also, but
two different looks though. Like
there are three different looks, bro.
Boxy to like more refined,
modern,
polished, modern.
Yeah.
The middle one is just like a mix of both, and it's like confused.
Some people don't like it. You're right.
Yeah.
Some people don't like it, but I was a fan. I still am a fan. But that's funny that you said that.
Yeah.
But no, I get what you're saying. A lot of people. A lot of people do like the E30. And I think a lot of the stigma comes from because it was the first M3 was the E30 M3. You know, that's the first one, which was dope. But I was actually a big fan of the E21, and that's another thing. It's like, I like E36s. I'm not a huge fan of E30s, but I really like E21s. And then E30s are super inflated. Like every hipster on the planet has an E30, bro.
Every hipster, he says. You can't even be a car enthusiast. It's just
they can be, but like you know what? I know some E30 guys that they're not even really car enthusiasts. They just like the E30. They're just like, I want classic I want the round headlights. I want an old car, which but
it's a fire car though.
Oh, it is. But
you know
what's it is. They are very nice cars. But you know what's interesting about the E30 is that in a straight line, this M20 cars, which is the 6-cylinder car, is not much faster than the M3, than the 4-cylinder M3, because it wasn't made to be a straight line car. The E30 M3 will blow it out of the water in handling.
Yeah.
But like on the road, like when you're punching it from a stoplight or whatever, the M20 was right there. It made way more torque.
Yeah.
And that's torque wins races. Everybody will tell you that. But what's interesting is that not until the E90 did that become a thing again, where the non-M1 was faster in straight line with the 335 versus the E90 M3.
Right.
That was kind of an interesting caveat. So, but I'm sorry to skip. So we were back at E30s.
Yeah. So E30s, like now, let's say if you are looking to pick one up, you know what the market value is for these cars now?
Oh, they're pricey. They've ranged so much. You can have a budget of like, if you let's say you're gonna have the entire range, you can be anywhere from like $2,500 to $20,000 or $30,000.
$2,500 for an E30?
You could probably find a rusty, E30 project car, and you can pick it up for $2,500. Yeah, I don't doubt it.
In New York?
Oh, I mean, in New York,
I wouldn't want to get
the amount. If you get in New York at E30 for $2,500, you might
just junk it. I feel
Yeah,
like.
I mean, it's you know,
I wouldn't-
it's like one man's trash is another man's treasure. You know, you see, like I said, you know, you're gonna get a car that's rusty. You're probably gonna get an early model car. Early model cars is much cheaper. You might get an early model 4-cylinder car, which is gonna be the cheapest one you can get. And yeah, you can turn that into, you know, a really, really cool project. But at the same time, I feel like something that you should always do when you're going to get a project car is to try to find as good of a base to start with versus saying, well, I'm going to build it anyway.
Yeah.
Because, you know, sometimes depending on the model you get, sometimes you want better brakes. Sometimes you want an LSD. You know, sometimes you want the nicer interior, you know, nicer sound system, whatever the case is. I always tell people try to find like the best base you want to start with and then go from there. Because if you just get a shell just to get a shell, you're going to be pouring money hand over fist into the car just to, you know, just to get it to where you want to get. So
I agree.
you can build them 6 different ways to Sunday, bro. It's like you have the M42, which is it's a 4-cylinder, good 4-cylinder, dual overhead cam, iron block. Not a lot of people mess with those, but you can turbo those, make a good amount of power. Very, very good engines. They take a beating, and they make decent power. If you're lucky enough to get your hands on an E30 M3, you already have legendary S14 engine, which, you know, is an evolution of that M12 engine. Really, really cool, boxy fenders. Like those cars they also hold their value insanely well, you know, and they drive very, very. I haven't driven a 4-cylinder E30 M3. I've driven 6-cylinder swapped E30 M3s, which the people swap in S52s, you know, or S50s from E36s.
I'm not crazy about that, honestly.
But you kind of take away from what the car really needed, and that car was really made to be a well balanced, you know, car for the canyon.
I would leave it NA. I wouldn't even put it
all day. But I feel like the people who swap those cars, like they want something else. You know, they want to throw a big turbo. They want to do whatever. They want to really. The problem is you overpower the car, and then it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
If you drive around an E30 M3 with 1,000 horsepower, you're not gonna like it.
Nah, I don't feel like it was. To be honest with you, that's one of those cars where I just feel like I would leave it as is, have fun with it, take it out for drives, and if I want to go to track days or whatever it is, like
there are some that work very well.
I'm not saying you don't. I prefer that.
One of my friends and customer, Flacco, he has a really nice white E30 vert that has a turbo M52 or S52. I forget the size of the bore, but that thing makes 820 wheel, and like he has a 6-speed tranny and he has everything. He has a standalone. He does like boost by gear.
Yeah.
When we tuned it and we did the setup on it, it hooks and just rips every single gear. Like the car just goes.
Yeah.
You put every gear it's in, it's at the exact limit for the road in every gear. And it's a lot of fun like that. But, you know, that's his baby though. He built that. That car has Gotti's on it, right? Gotti wheels. And he has a spare of the 3-piece Gotti wheels in there. So like even his spare wheel in the trunk is a Gotti 3-piece wheel. Which, like, you know, if you had a flat with one of your work wheels on your Supra, what are you gonna put? You're gonna put a spare on. But your spare is another work 3-piece wheel. Like that's a different type of flex.
That's pretty cool.
To me, that's a different type of flex. But no, you know, they come with the M20. Most E30s you're gonna find are gonna be an M20 car, whether it be an I car or an E car. The E cars were lower RPM, larger displacement, and they had a different cylinder head. The I cars was actually smaller crankshaft, higher revving, and you know, a little more fun. And then you had the IS cars. The IS cars were the sport, so they came with LSD. You know, they came with like different trim and stuff. But it was like, if you were gonna do an E30, you try to find a real IS. But the problem is that today these cars have been swapped, touched by everybody. So like the chances of you finding an untouched, unmolested IS is very slim.
You could probably find one on Bring a Trailer, right?
Yeah, Bring a Trailer is a very good site, but the issue is like I said, is like, you know, some of these people, they build a car just to sell it on Bring a Trailer.
Yeah.
So, you know, they'll try to make it period correct and they'll try to sell it properly on there because, you know, they got rep, they got to keep up. But at the end of the day, dude, you know, you're also on premium trailer. You're gonna pay a premium for the car.
I know.
You know, but that's the type of car you want to get a premium. You want to pay a premium for. If you're getting it today, if you're buying an E30, you're buying it because you love the car and because you want to build one, and you're probably gonna keep it.
Right.
People don't these days. People don't buy E30s to flip them or to just be like, oh, I want to build this and then I'm gonna sell it. People don't really do that these days with E30s. Back in the day, like 10 or 12 years ago, you could find E30 $500 all day.
That's crazy.
All day. There was a guy
$500.
There was a guy over in Uniondale that he had a yard full of E30s, bro. If you had an E30 in New York and you needed a part, or even in the tri-state area, this guy had like, imagine the backyard. Imagine like the yard to an elementary school. This was in Uniondale. I'm pretty sure it was Uniondale. It was in that area, and it was a yard full. It was a junkyard of E30s, and he would sell you whatever you needed. I'm like, I went there one time with my friend Dana, and he has an E30, and this guy, the guy's name was James. He had everything there, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, he don't got a permit for none of this stuff, man. But it's no longer there. But that was a lot of people, anyone from New York that's in the BMW game with the E30s and stuff, they're going to know what I'm talking about for sure.
So now you said your friend had a turbo one, so I'm sure you can definitely make some power with those.
He had it swapped though.
Oh, he had it swapped.
He had a E36 engine. But you know, I was telling you with the M42, the 4-cylinder, you can make power with that. They also came M10 also. So the M10, you can make some power with that too. Plenty of people turbo those. You make 300-400 horsepower with those. The M42 also, and then the M20, plenty of people turbo those. They're just not. There's a timing. That's a timing belt straight six. They're just not as responsive to making power versus like the E36 dual overhead cam straight six, which respond very well to boost. Those M20s, they make good power. You can enjoy them, but the issue with a lot of them is that people don't want to put the money into those cars. Nowadays, it's a little different.
Okay.
Nowadays, like I said, if you're buying an E30, it's because you want to build it properly.
Right.
So you'll put a standalone on it. You know, you will do like nice, you know, intercooler setups, nice turbo setups. You do all this stuff because you like the car for real. Right. And if you do a proper M20 turbo build, I mean, there are M20s that make a lot of power, but you can have a perfectly fun, reliable 400 or 500 horsepower M20 if you do it right. You know,
that's what I would do.
But if you're going, you know, if you want more than 500, then I'm going to tell you to swap a 24 valve in, which is what people call it. They call it a 24 valve swap. Okay. And then people also swap S54s, which is, you know, the E46 M3 engine. For me personally, if I was going to do an E30 today, I would try to get my hands on an M42. I've been really wanting to do an M42 turbo, like E30, something like that, like something a little more mild, just like keep it where it's light, keep it where it's still a small engine, make like, you know, like 300-400 horsepower and enjoy it like that. The big drawback with those cars though is the rear suspension. The rear suspension on the E30 is like very, very, very outdated. There's no toe adjustment in the rear. There's things you can do to it to add toe adjustment, but you'd have to like really change the structure of the car. You have to add like a toe adjuster, like weld-on tabs and stuff to try to be able to adjust toe in the rear. And then you don't have camber adjustment either. It's literally you lower the car and it's whatever geometry you have. It is. That's it. There's no aligning it. So like, you know, a lot of people have issues with those cars because of that. Because like they don't have the rear suspension geometry that you need to really get the most out of a car.
If you're having it like OEM suspension, stock height, and you want to drive it the way it is,
you'll be fine. It'll handle well. But if you're trying to make some power, if you're trying to make some power and then you lower the car, you put these crazy wheels on the car, you won't be able to get the right suspension geometry with it. Right. You know, but they all came. You know, every car has their quirks, and the car's so light that it does handle well. Right. You know, so it's like you get a trade-off. You get a light car, you have a good-looking car, but you got dated suspension. But it's cars from the 80s at the end of the day.
So I don't know if we skipped over the E28. Did we speak about the E28?
No, we didn't. Okay, we went right into the E30 because you mentioned the E30. You mentioned the E30, but
so the E28 5 Series, right?
Beautiful 5 Series. But then you had the E24, which is the 6 2-door. It's the same car, just 2 doors. They came with many different engines. But what's very interesting is that you can get that car, you can get those with an M20. You can get those with an M10. You can get them with an M88, and you can get them with a S38. They're in Europe. There's even diesel options. So like, and also the M30 engine. There's so many different engines you can get with those cars, but I like the E28 a lot. It is to me, it's one of the best looking 5 Series.
Really?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I wanted to do a different project. So I was looking at getting an E28 or getting an E34 because I really wanted to do an M30 build. And M30 is it's a 3.4 straight 6.
Right.
3.4, 3.5. They're all like, they're like right there. And that block is actually the same block that comes in the S38 and the same block that comes in the M88. So like the block is essentially the same. It is this huge 6-cylinder block that has like these, I think they're 90 millimeter or 92 millimeter pistons. Very simple design, and the block is really dense. So like it could take a lot of power.
Yeah.
And people who build these cars, build these engines, they make something like 650 or 700 foot-pounds of torque, and they drive awesome because they make so much torque.
Yeah.
The problem is they don't rev that high, and then, because it's a single overhead cam cylinder head, they don't really flow that well above, 5,000 RPM, 6,000 RPM is like 6,000 RPM is like that's it. It's like LS world. Like you can't rev it too high, or you're gonna have a bad time. But I wanted to build something cool like that. I wanted to do a turbo M30, like some nice wheels, low to the ground, and I was looking for an E28 or an E34. I ended up getting an E34, but if I would have found an E28 for the same price or round about the same price, I would have gotten that. I would have gotten that.
Did we talk about the E23? The M106 engine?
No, we didn't talk about that. But that's essentially a turbo M30 engine that came in the 745. Some of those cars came here to the States, but it was essentially just I'm pretty sure it was non-intercooled too. It was just like turbocharger to the intake for, turbo straight 6. But that was that M30 engine. And that's when people really started turboing these cars. They're like, shoot, it came from factory with a turbo. Let's turn it up. But those blocks the rods are humongous. I'm gonna tell you right now, if you you can have an S38 and make 800 wheel torque with a factory connecting rod and factory piston. The connecting rod is like that big.
What?
Yeah, I'll try to find a picture for you so you can,
Yeah.
so you'll look it up.
Damn.
M30 connecting rod is humongous, and they take a ton of abuse. But the problem is revving them out because it's such a heavy rotating assembly.
Right.
Revving it up is not very good. So like you can make a ton of torque, but you're not gonna make a lot of horsepower. Because remember, horsepower equals torque times RPM divided by 5252.
Yeah, we spoke about that on the last episode too.
Yeah.
There was a lot of little things like that it's more common knowledge. People, I'm sure if you went to school for that, you would know that.
Yeah.
Or if you're really tapped in and you're like working in a shop all the time. But for people who aren't, and more so looking up stuff on the internet, you're not going to come across that unless you're actually looking for it.
Unless you're like really looking into it, and that's the thing. Like I saw it a few times on the internet, but not a lot of people talked about it.
Right.
But yeah, that was the first iteration of that engine. E31s are cool. 8 Series is one of the coolest looking cars.
That's a hood classic too.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Hood classic.
Oh man, I love those cars. They're so cool, but never meet your heroes.
What color are you thinking of when you think about that car though?
When I think of that car, maybe silver.
I was thinking about the green.
Oh, the green's nice.
That's what comes to mind for some reason.
I like silver.
I didn't really see too many silver ones. I always see like that green color. Like
No, I remember silver.
Like
I remember
green.
blue. I remember seeing them in every color.
Blue
and
too,
you know what else? Every time I saw one, it was smoking like crazy out the tailpipe. Those engines, man, they were not great. Well, they were kind of castrated versions of themselves. The M60 engine that those came with, they had their own issues with timing chains and stuff like that, and head gaskets and valve seals. They just,
how were the electronics in that car?
Oh, horrible. They were trying to reinvent the wheel 15 times over. So like they have like weird things, like the seats stopped working. They have like 15-way adjustable seats. Like they stopped working immediately. And then something else is really weird is like the floor of the car, because the car is a really low roof line. Yeah. The floor of the car is like, it feels really high. So like if you're tall like me, you're very uncomfortable in the car. Because it's like so it's just like the way like your legs are is so weird. It's just like very, very high. But what's interesting though is that That car also came with the M70, and the M70 is the same block as they used in the McLaren F1. And we talked about that in the other episode.
Yeah.
Where it was literally a road-going V12 engine, and they took the heads off and they re-engineered it and they put some nasty cylinder heads on it, and the thing makes, it's in one of the most legendary road cars.
Yeah.
And then BMW also had a slightly milder version of the McLaren F1 engine in the original BMW M8. That car never got released, but BMW has a bunch of pictures of it. You could find pictures of that stuff online.
Yeah.
And it's like really cool. It has like a hood scoop and stuff. And
right.
It's red. That one's red. And it has like side vents too. Really cool looking car.
But they never released it?
They never released it, no.
So
there's a weird, it's like an M basement garage or like M garage of unreleased cars. Like like unreleased music or whatever.
Yeah.
BMW has this. They have a E46 M3 wagon. They have an, cool, bro. It looks really cool. They have the E31 M8. They have a E28 M5, but a two-door version, which would have been an M6, but they had like the higher roof lines. Or maybe it wasn't the E28. I think it was the E34 actually.
But it was an M5 with two-door?
Yeah. It was a two-door M5. It was just weird. They had a few weird cars, and they're like, we ain't releasing this shit. Like, they put all this time and money into making the car.
Yeah.
And they're like, on second thought, this is a bad idea. We're not going to drop we're not going to drop this one, But
and there's a garage full of these cars.
Yeah, it's like a basement or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll find it. We'll look it up. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to find it. But I wish I had a little more info on that because that's funny. But you had that. You had the E31. Then you had the E32. A lot of cool engines in that one. You had a lot, like you had the M60, you had you had the M70 also, you had M30s. You had a lot of different engines. You got to remember, BMW is one company that they like to make a good engine or an engine that they believe to be good, and they slam it in every car that they can. Yeah. And a lot of times back then it's cool because, you can have the same engine that different chassis have. Today, everything comes with a B58, so like it's boring. Right. Everything is a downpipe and a tune away from running 11s. You know, so
we're getting into that era where
it is kind of everything. Instead of having like 5 or 6 different engine choices for every single chassis, they all pretty much come with the same 1 or 2 engines. But back then, they had so many different engines. Yeah, which was, I think it was a cool thing. And what's interesting is that the differential that comes in that V12 7 Series, the E32, that's actually what a lot of E36 guys use. It's called the large case diff, so it's a 210 millimeter ring gear. Okay. Those differentials, we use them, and they can handle over 1,000 foot-pounds of torque.
What does that convert to? So compared to like a Ford 8.8?
It's like a 8 and I think it's like 8 1/4.
Oh wow,
something like that. So instead of an 8.8, it'd be like 8 1/4. Yeah. But they handle a lot of power. You got to remember also the quality of the steel that is in the differential has a lot to do with how much power it can take. And also the geometry of the differential, like where the pinion is on the ring gear and stuff like that. All those things will make it handle more power or handle less power. Perfect example. An 8.8 is 8.8 inches. But if you had a Chevy 10 bolt, which is like, a Chevy 10 bolt is not a small differential. But because they have such a bad rep and they break left and right all the time, you would be like, this thing's trash. It can't handle anything more than 500 horsepower. And they really can't unless you build them. Like you can put stronger gears in them and then they handle pretty well, but they break all the time. What's interesting is that there are other differentials that are really strong. Nissan has the R200. It's a 200 millimeter ring gear.
You see that with the S2000s.
And you read about those being able to handle over 800 foot-pounds. And it's like, wait a second. But I thought, if it was 200 millimeters, which I'm pretty sure the Chevy 10 bolt is larger than 200 millimeters. If it's 200 millimeters, it can't handle the power. No, it's just bad steel in that part, or bad geometry in that part. And then the other thing also is like it's the weight of the car that it's carrying. Right. You got to remember the differential is carrying all the weight of the car when you launch it. So if you got a really heavy car, you're gonna need a really strong differential.
So why do you think the Ford 8.8 is it mostly because of how versatile it is and how many options you have?
It's because there's a million of them out there. Okay. It's because you can buy them in anything. Yeah. You can find them in a Crown Vic. You can find them in a Ford Explorer. You know, they're
everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
You can find them in Mustangs. You can find them in everything. And you know, they make everything for them. They make service kits. They make, you know, they make lockups for them. They make spools. They make everything for every gear ratio under the sun. You can get in an 8.8, and it's easy to mount up into different cars. So that's why a lot of people use them. And they were cheap. Now they're starting to get expensive. So it's like, you know, you got to snatch it up. The 7 Series differential I was telling you about, there's a finite amount of them. They're not that many out there anymore. So like those differentials now, they're going for like $1,800, $2,000. Back then, it was a $200 differential. You buy a $200 differential from a 7 Series, and you put it in your E36, and your E36 can make over 1,000 horsepower and handle it all day, all day. So, you know, that's something where, you know, times are changing. Now, at one point, what's going to happen? Because we're going to have to buy a differential from, you know, a newer BMW, which they all come with good differentials also, but I think they all come with 210s nowadays. Like the performance BMWs, they all come with 210 millimeter ring gears. But you know, adapting those is going to be difficult because of the way they bolt up and then the way the axles are. They don't just have like a bolt on CV anymore. Now a lot of those differentials, they spline right into the differential. Yeah. And it's like that now you have a problem when you measuring your axle length and then like the compressed length or the, you know, or the unloaded length, everything is different. So like if you overshoot or undershoot it, your suspension geometry is off. The car's gonna, you know, the differential could break. Your car could ride like shit. Lock, like it can do weird things like, you know, twitch when the suspension comes down. Really weird stuff.
That's what I noticed with the Supra too, because on the Supra, you can use a lot of the older BMW stuff. Like you can use the E90 M3 diff, and it actually bolts right up.
Really,
casing is literally pretty much identical. So you can use a lot of the older style BMW stuff. But again, it's finding it, like you said. And then also in the M3, I think we spoke about this before, there's different gear ratios as well. So I think one's like 315 and one's 385.
315 is a big zero ratio for M3s, like BMWs in general. A lot of cars come with that diff ratio. Yeah. It's interesting that a lot of BMWs are like Legos, where you can you can use like different parts from different BMWs and make something work. My car is a testament to that because my car has parts from an X5, parts from an X5M, 335, E46. It has so many different parts in it to make it you work, know, all-wheel drive or make it work in general. Where it was like it's like that, where it's like, you know, Legos all put together. Yeah. But that was cool. And then I spoke a little bit, but the E34 is really, really cool car. I feel like the E34 is
the 5 Series.
Yes.
E34
it's also
5 Series.
The last circle headlight BMW.
Okay.
So like that style that you like, the E30, that's the last one that you can get with that is the E34.
But on the 5 Series, the headlights were a little bit slimmer, right? They weren't as large as the E30.
Well, they had a few different models. Okay. And it wasn't really the headlights that made it look like that. It was the actual grille. So like if you had a 6-cylinder E34, the grills were narrower. On the V8 ones, the grill was wider, and then the grooves in the hood were also wider, which is like a weird thing that they did. I don't know why they did that. That was like, sometimes you try to like, people at the time would buy the wrong hood or buy the wrong grills and like shit don't fit. And it looks weird because like the way the hood lines up to the grill, it lit like that's how they did it. And I couldn't believe that they did that. That was one of the dumbest things that they did. But hey, and you know what's funny? Some people are going to tell you this one looks better or this one looks better. It's all preference. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, I like the 6-cylinder ones. Fine. But yeah, I like E34s. They come with many different engines. You can get an E34 with an M20. You can get an E34 with an M30, with an M50. You can get a V8 E34. You can get S38 M5 if you get an E34 M5. If you're lucky enough, those cars are like $40,000
with that motor.
Oh my god, E34 M5 is insanely expensive. Damn. Those cars are so pricey. Yeah, good friend of mine has one. Has a E34 wagon that's at my shop. You saw it. Really nice turbo setup, T56 Magnum. So we're finishing that up for him. He's got a really nice car. He's got a bunch of nice cars. He has a 1 Series with a LS in it, super fast.
So the E34 electrical issues, any electrical issues?
They have a ton of electrical issues. That's like when they were experimenting with like different modules and stuff like that. And then they put the battery underneath the rear seat. And then whenever water leaks into the car, it leaks under the rear seat. And then they also put all the modules underneath the rear seat. So like modules from the 90s are not what you see today. What you see today are very different. What you see today are like very sophisticated computers where they have all their capacitors and the resistors, whatever. Modules that you saw before were trying to do that, but like, perfect example. You got a floppy disk, 3.5, it's like 3.5 megabits, right? Versus, and floppy disk was like a good size.
Yeah.
Versus you take an SD card and it's like 500 gigabytes. Technology just changes.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that stuff just really got outdated like this, and people don't make it anymore. You got to buy stuff from old cars. Like if you have one that windows don't work or whatever, you know, you're gonna have to go through the electrical system, and you're gonna hate yourself. If you're gonna get an E34, get one where everything works for sure. If you get an M60 E34, good luck, because those are the most unreliable ones, but they sound the best. It's a V8 in a 5 Series. Like it sounds really, really good, and they pull great too.
Yeah.
Those cars are pretty rare. They go for a pretty penny also. But I just like the straight six stuff. I just feel like BMW's always been like a straight six company.
Yeah.
You get a BMW with a straight six. Don't get me wrong, their V8 stuff is cool, but if you get an E34, chances are you're gonna want a M51 because they come with the dual overhead cam engine. Like if you want to make some power with one, that's what you're gonna get.
Has BMW ever been kind of like the leader in any V8 or V10, V12 platforms at all?
You know, I don't know if I could say the leader.
Because like we all know they do
In the
inline
V12,
sixes.
yeah, because they made the McLaren F1 engine. So
Aside
you know,
from that
counts.
aside from that one, yeah.
Beyond that, I mean, every company has different engines that are great. The issue is that I don't think BMW had a good V8 until the N63 TU and the S63, but even those engines are way too complicated to put into anything else. They have coolant lines going everywhere. They're just really, really over-engineered. Even the S62, which is essentially like a built it's like a built M60. The S62 engine, we rebuilt one at my shop for a customer, and it is so complicated to where you have the oil filter housing, like the oil filter goes through the motor mount arm. And you know, it's like if you don't replace these O-rings on this stuff, like you're gonna bleed out your oil pressure. Thing's gonna kaput on your first start. And then like their oiling system is really weird. The chain setup is a little complicated. The head design is simple, but like the VANOS system isn't. They use the VANOS system that comes like on the S54s, which is really, really horrible. People delete it all the time because of how complicated it is. But you know, if you get the system working right, you're fine. Yeah. But it's a very good system, but it's just extremely overcomplicated. I feel like that entire era where they were trying to make those engines, like where they were trying to make the M engines with that dual VANOS setup, was really all bang and no bark. They just they kind of fell flat. And people are gonna hate me for saying that, but at the end of the day, an S54 is not 2 or 3 times better than an S52. It's just not. And we didn't even get to the E36 stuff yet, but a lot of people like to talk about. Actually, no, we're done with E34s. We're gonna jump right into E36s. E36s, you came with many different engines, but the best thing about the E36 in the United States or in the North American market is that they came with every 6-cylinder that came in them was an iron block engine.
Right.
So all around the world, if you look in like videos in Europe and stuff like that, if it's a non-M engine, you'll see people have M50 turbo, and people don't do M52 turbos. What's interesting is that I didn't know at the time, but in the United States, you got it with an iron block. Everywhere else in the world, well, in the North American market, everywhere else in the world, you got it with an aluminum block. And the aluminum engines, they have problems. They pull out the threads when you're torquing the head down. You know, they just can't handle the torque because it's an aluminum block. It's not iron. It can't handle all the abuse. And people like to say all the time, oh, the United States, like they got sunned when 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 they got the M3 because their M3 has less power. The United States M3 came with 240 horsepower. The Euro M3 or Japan M3, every other M3 came with the 3 liter, it was a 286 horsepower engine.
3 liter.
3 liter.
Okay.
Which in United States was a S50. They were both S50s, but one was called S50B30 US, which is the US model, and then S50B30, which was the rest of it.
Right.
The S50B30 is a 286 horsepower engine, but it has individual throttle bodies, which when you turbo a car, it's a huge restriction. And when you turbo these, a lot of people are getting these cars to turbo them because at the end of the day, the car can handle, the suspension geometry is very good in the car. It's the same as E46. And they handle a lot of power. You can drive these things at 200 miles an hour and it's not going to rattle apart or fall apart on you. And it feels pretty stable. But the Euro cars, to turbo the S50B30 Euro, those engines are so much more complicated because it's essentially like an S54. Okay. And then you had the E36 M3 Evo in Europe, which is it's not an S52, but it's a S50B32. That engine is 321 horse versus the United States 240 horsepower again. Right. But all their M52s outside of the United States and North America, they were all aluminum block and they don't take the abuse. So I feel like we like turbos over here. We like a lot of horsepower. I feel like we got the best deal because at the end of the day, we got the best engines for boost. Right. That's how I feel. Some people might not like that. I'm sorry, race me. But
if you're into BMWs and you love the Street Alpha podcast, check out our exclusive BMW t-shirts. Now available with a hoodie option too. Hit the link below to grab yours today.
The VANOS system in the single VANOS engines, very simple. It's a lot like 2JZ VVTi. Okay. Where you're advancing and retarding the intake cam for spool or for horsepower. So like you advance it for torque, to get more air into the engine, and then up top it'll retard the intake back to its zero position. And, and it flows better for high RPM. So it's like you get the best of both worlds.
I have a question about that before you move on from that.
Sure.
Let's go on that topic right now, right? Now, with the VVTi or VANOS or MyVec or variable valve timing options are for different platforms, right? At what point is that something where you want to remove it from motor?
It really all depends. A lot of times people remove them because one, they don't have a standalone that's capable of controlling it. Okay. Or two, they're beyond the limits of the engine or beyond the limits of the hardware. Some cars, like VVTi cars, at a certain horsepower, a certain torque, they start to break the VVTi gear.
Okay, so it's that gear itself that
on those engines,
right?
Some engines, like on the VANOS stuff, we don't really have that problem. Yeah. Sometimes people complain about VANOS issues like rattle and stuff like that. That's just like the seals inside the VANOS go bad, and then it doesn't have enough oil pressure. Okay. And then like it rattles, like the gears rattle inside of it. But they also have like different shim kits to make it not rattle. Okay. So they have like a whole bunch of different things to do. Like they have different remedies for that stuff. Now that stuff is not really a problem. But then like MyVec, people delete MyVec all the time. I don't, I'm not too familiar with it, but I know that on a lot of the cars with the MyVec stuff, like I guess, I don't know if it's like camshaft availability. I don't know if it's tuning with standalones and stuff like that, because the way you have to tune it now is you need a lot of those things to work off a solenoid or with oil pressure. So you need like an extra output, right? To run it, and then you need like your different camshaft position sensors, and everything has to read on the ECU. Some people are really lazy. Some companies are really lazy. Companies are just like, delete it, do this, blah blah blah, adios. Yeah. S54s, they delete VANOS all the time, and there's a huge issue with S54s. AEM was making standalone kits for S54s, and then when people had those kits on their cars, nobody can figure out how to get the VANOS to work. So AEM, instead of telling everybody what the problem is, they discontinue the ECU and the ECU kit, and don't tell anybody what their issue is. Well, oh, you have a hardware issue, you have this, you have that. Nobody had a hardware issue. There's a setting in the AM Infinity computer that you'd have to go into, and you'd have to manually set your camshaft, your intake camshaft degree and your exhaust camshaft degree limits, because the car thinks it's at 1, or the engine thinks it's at 1 because the ECU is thinking that. But if you don't go into that wizard and manually change those, it'll just default into the 0 position because it's trying to save you your engine. It's trying to make sure it doesn't engage it and it doesn't clap your valves into your pistons.
Right.
But the amount of people I know that sell their AEM setups because they can't get it to work, it's crazy. You know, or that don't sell them and they delete their VANOS and lock the cams, which is fine because you just lock them in a position where you kind of get the best of both worlds. It's like, okay, I locked it to where I have a good spool and I have good top end. Fine, whatever, it's done.
Yeah.
But you don't have that back and forth, you know, which you want to build the best setup. You want to take the most advantage of it.
Now, more so, I guess in drag applications, they would probably just remove that, because that, I'm assuming, is something more for drivability. If you want to be able to go on the street and drive it and also take it to the track, and you have those options.
Yeah, you get a lot of drivability. You know, when you drive cars that have the VANOS deleted, they feel really flat.
Okay.
They don't have a lot of torque, but up top they rip because that's where it's living.
Yeah.
But for drag applications, think about it. When you launch the car, you're at 5,000 RPM. And when you shift the car from 9,000, you're back at 7,000 RPM. So like you're never below that.
Right.
You don't need it. Fine.
Right.
You know, that's fine. But at the same time, it's like if you don't build a one-trick pony, you need a car that can do everything. And when you build a car that does everything, you want to use everything to your best abilities. There are a lot of people that know a lot of things. But for the most part, when it comes to most motorsport engines and like the engineering that came behind that engine, these engineers that were, you know, teams of engineers that were building engines or designing engines, like they knew best. Yeah. And they were like, you know what, we're gonna give it this because we want to give it a little more bottom end, but we don't want to give up the top end. So we're gonna change the intake cam. If we do this, we get the best of both worlds. Bam. All right, awesome. Lock it up, send it out the door, put it in 1,000 cars. Actually, more than that, put in hundreds of thousands of cars. You know, that's a cool thing. I think it was. But, you know, E36s came with so many different engines. They came with the 24 valve, 6 cylinders. You can get a 2-liter M50. You can get a 2.5-liter M50. You can get a 3-liter, which would be the S50 US engine I'm talking about, which is essentially a board and stroke version of the M50. Okay. And then the M52 stuff was just OBD2. Those engines were all 2.5, 2.8, and then you had S52, which is a 3.2.
That's what you have in this, right? M52?
I have an M52.
Okay.
I have an M52.
So it's 2.8?
2.8.
Okay.
A lot of people like to build M52s with S52 crankshafts because you're stroking the motor. Right. Pause. Hard pause. But you're stroking the motor and you get a lot more torque out of it. You get a lot more torque, but then up top it doesn't, you know, it's not as great. But they make a lot of power. They work very well. For some people, that's great. Me, I like something a little different. I like the sound that the M52 gives you. And then on top of that, I also like to rev it really high because, you know, I love high revving engines. They just sound really good. You're beating the hell out of it. It's just something that I really, really enjoy. So I build, my personal engine is 2.8, but I've built many different ones. And then when it comes down to it, because they're all board and stroke versions of each other, the bore spacing gets very small. So if you start out with an M50, which is an M50 and M52 are both 84 millimeter bore. Okay. Now, and it's an iron block. The bore spacing is like a certain amount. Now, when you go 86, which is the S50, you lose 2 millimeters on both sides of that space in between the cylinders. Now, your cylinder head doesn't seal as well. And on top of that, it's the same block. Your wall thickness is not there. Right. So like it already can only handle less. Yeah. And it's like if you had a piece of glass and that piece of glass is getting thinner and thinner and thinner, it can't take as much weight. And then if you have then the other problem is that if you build an S52 or even if you build an S50, they go to 87 millimeter bore, which these engines are like at their absolute limit. They are so thin, and you really want to keep them at like when you turbo these engines. Yeah. Those engines, you don't want to go over 700 foot-pounds because that's really where they start to either crack the bore or they lift the cylinder head. They blow the head gasket.
Yeah.
I did one, we tuned one at the shop where this guy has it's a Z3M, which with an S52. And it was an engine that Mike Radowski built a long time ago, maximum PSI. Funny enough, that E30 I was talking about that was really fast, Mike Radowski also built that engine too.
Okay.
Way before my time. But the Z3M, it had a G35 1050 on it.
Okay.
And that thing makes so much torque that it was a struggle to keep it at 700 foot-pounds. But like we kept it at 700 and the torque stayed flat from 4,000 RPM until like 72 or 7,500 RPM. And it made like 900. I think it made 870 wheeled horse or something like that. Because like, if you keep the torque flat and you can manipulate the power curve. So like the engine wants to breathe a certain amount, but if you slowly bring in the torque and then once it hits its peak, you can raise your duty cycle on your boost controller to kind of creep up the boost from your spool up to your red. So let's say you slowly bring it into like 20 pounds. And then by redline, it's at 27. It's because you want to keep that same torque all the way across to raise the horsepower. The car feels like a go-kart because it's just ever accelerating because the boost is increasing linear. You can also mess with the timing too to kind of keep the torque curve down. But S52s, you got to get tricky like that because that if you turn the car up to 29 pounds or 30 pounds, it wants to make like 850 foot-pounds of torque, which will pop the motor like that, And last thing I want to do is dyno a car and call the guy and be like, "Yo, bro, your car blew up."
Yeah,
like that's the last thing I want to do.
So I know we kind of briefly spoke about this before we were going to wait for the podcast. So how are you from between timing and boost? What are you using to keep the torque down between those two?
You can use both. If you pull timing out, you can keep the torque down, but at the same time, you can easily, on a turbo engine, when you're on a standalone, you can keep the boost down also. It all depends on where the turbo matches the engine. Like we said earlier, turbo technology is changing like crazy.
Right.
And it's getting to the point where you have on that car with a G35 1050, that car is on a 67 millimeter turbo and it pretty much wants to make 1,000 horsepower, but it's spooling it so early to the point where it's like, if you let it take its natural boost curve without a standalone or, without like a boost controller that can creep in the boost, it'll probably make 800 foot-pounds like this.
Right.
And that, unfortunately, won't be reliable. And also, it's undrivable, too. The torque comes on and you can't drive the car on the street because it's just blowing the tires off. But like on newer cars like the F80s and like G80s and stuff like that, they can do those things boost by gear. And they can also creep in the boost like that, too. They have a lot more flexibility with those cars. So, stuff that we didn't have, they have.
Okay, so let's say you're doing a wide open throttle pull, right? You're doing a full, whatever gear it is, you're 1-to-1 gear, right? That's what you technically call it, right? Now in that gear, right, you're on the dyno, you're rolling. Now, how are you ramping in this boost and how are you keeping the torque down? Because technically, you said it could make 800 or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, when you do it, when you're tuning a car, you don't start your car at 40 pounds of boost when you start tuning your car.
Correct.
You start first off, you gate we call it gating. You spring your gate to a certain boost. And whatever boost that you spring your gate at, if your wastegate flow is proper to the wastegate, will be the lowest boost you can run.
So if you have a 25-pound spring in your wastegate.
Let's say you have a 25-pound spring on your wastegate, which is a bad idea.
I'm just saying.
I'm just telling you. I'm telling people right now, that's a bad idea for your first car that you're building or any car that you're building.
Let's say 8 or 15.
No, well, yeah. Let's say, okay, if you're building a car, and
10.
10. Well, no. Like I said, if you're building a car, a 10-pound spring is a good medium. But if you kind of know where you sized your stuff and you've been doing your research, you can realistically start with 1 bar, which is 14.7. So you would want to spring it to 1 bar, and then from there, there's like a few tricks you can do to like raise that minimum boost. But like for example, you can use your boost reference. So your wastegate reference, people put them right at the turbo, right? And you got to remember, you have your turbo, you have your intercooler piping, you have your intercooler, and you have your other intercooler piping, and then you have your intake manifold, right? So like the turbo needs to flow all through that before it gets to the intake manifold. So if you have a 14-pound spring on your wastegate, and you use the port that is on your turbocharger, you might see 10 or 12 pounds at your intake manifold if your system is not that efficient. But if you're losing 2 or 3 pounds through your intake manifold and you move your reference to the intake manifold, then you'll see 15, you might get 16 out of it.
Okay.
But then the other side of the trick is this. If you're running out of, when you're on an electronic boost controller, you use both ports on the gate. You can do it multiple ways. But when you're using an electronic boost controller, it's because you want to use both ports on the gate, the top and the bottom.
Okay.
So you use the bottom from the intake side, but then the top of the gate you use from the turbo side. You're going to get even more of an offset because the boost is, you have more boost at the turbocharger versus what you have at the intake manifold. So a lot of times people will do it backwards, or people will just do it all from the turbocharger or all from the intake manifold. And they're like, oh, well, I was only able to get a certain amount of boost from the electronic wastegate. My car, I sprung it for 14, but it's opening at 12 or 11 pounds of boost. And I tell them, like, well, you got to look at your wastegate routing and you got to take a look at that stuff. And then sometimes people route their wastegates wrong and they blow their cars up first hit. That's what I'm telling you. If you're going to do it, spring your gate properly and size your turbo properly also. You know, when you're on the dyno, a good tuner is always going to start at the absolute lowest boost, and they're going to get your idle right. They're going to get your drivability right, and then they're going to start creeping it in, and you're going to start tuning the car. I was doing a remote tune. I was doing one for a customer the other day where is a friend of mine. He was renting the dyno, and he had his remote tuner, and this guy was on the laptop, whatever, and he's like, "Yeah, do a hit, strap it down, see what it does, whatever." But he wasn't logged on yet. And I sat in the car, and the laptop wasn't set up, and I'm laying in the car. It was an E46 M3 on a stock engine, and I'm laying into it, and it's going, and I can hear it, I can feel it, and it's at like I feel like the thing is already making 18 or 20 pounds, and I'm like, this is a stock motor M3. This is just gonna blow the rods all over my dyno right now. So I lift it at like 5,000 RPM, and I'm like, this shit was about to make like 20 or 30 pounds of boost. Like, he's like, nah, dude, it was like 14. I'm like, no. This was way over that already. So he plugged in the laptop. By the time we plugged in the laptop, the tuner already logged on. So like, some tuners are really like, oh, I don't want you to look at my stuff. Whatever, blah, blah. They're all divas. Some of them are anyway, not all of them. But when he finished tuning, his car made 600 and change.
Okay.
But guess what? That first hit, the car made 600 at like 5,000 RPM because of how much power it was already making. So it was at like 25 pounds of boost, you know?
Yeah.
And a good dyno operator or a good friend or anybody is going to sit in the car and be like, something is not right. Some people would stay in it and blow the car up on the first hit on the dyno. Last thing I want to do is clean oil out of the dyno room. That's the last thing I want to do. But yeah, no, I would tell everybody, you spring the gate properly. Every good tuner is going to start out, slowly ramping it in, and you make how... If you have a car that should make XYZ horsepower and XYZ boost, and you're tuning the car and it's way under that, tuner's going to stop and he's going to say, something's wrong, check it over. Let's look at cam timing. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. But then you have some tuners that are just going to send it, or if the tuner sees, hey, this thing's making great power. We're in good shape. Everything's looking good. Let's keep going. But, if you have a tuner that doesn't care, you're in for a rough ride. You're going to build 3-4 engines before you're really going to figure it out that your problem the entire time was your tuner. That happens.
Yeah, tuning is super important.
It is. Yeah. Tuning is very important. And there's a lot of good tuners out there. There are, some people get very pissy about tuners and they're like, oh, this guy sucks because, I went faster with this guy. Okay, but guess what? That guy's tuned 200 cars of the same exact car that you have. Like, he does a lot of them. Just because, you went marginally faster with somebody else doesn't mean that he's not a good tuner.
Right.
Everybody always wants the best of the best. I want a car that's going to drive and not break every time I drive it.
Yeah.
And that's something else. It's like your guest from the turbocharger company.
Robert Young.
Yes. he had said like, okay, yeah, you can build a one trick pony with a turbocharger that'll go fast in a quarter mile, but like he'll build a turbocharger that will work for all applications, which will work on the quarter mile and work on the street.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what I'd rather have. I'd rather have a car that does everything at once. But I mean, if you build, build a straight drag car, okay, whatever. You know. But by that point, you already got your team, you got your tuner, you got your engine build, you got everything at that point. So,
okay, we pretty much cleared up the E36.
Yeah, E36 is done, murdered in the hole. Adios.
E38.
Yeah, E38's a cool car. They came M60s. So if you get an E38, you're not building it. You're gonna do like, you're gonna clean it up. You're gonna lower it. You're gonna, do like a VIP style build.
Yeah.
Like, like
I've seen. Did they come with the phone in them?
Yeah.
So,
you can get a lot of cars with a phone in them.
Yeah, I think
one of my best friends has a Miata with a phone in it. Okay,
a Miata,
like an old Miata, like a '92 Miata with a phone.
They came with phones.
I mean,
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
His got a phone, bro.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back then you would see like, the classic suitcase of my huge phone business dude.
Transporter.
So a lot of that stuff was more BMW. I like vividly remember like those, those old films. And a BMW is what they'd be driving, or a Mercedes.
Yeah.
But BMW is what I, kind of have in my head as a memory from having the phone in there. But that car definitely was probably the 7 Series, which is the bigger body. Those are the cars that the business people would kind of have.
Yeah, those cars are cool. But you had, they actually came in 2 different lengths.
Okay.
That E38, you had a 740i or you had a 740iL. There were also some V12 ones, which was the 750. But the IL was like 5 or 6 inches long or something like that, which every inch counts. And some of those cars look really good. They do look really nice, but they're such a big car. I know a few people that tried to make them kind of fast, but dude, you're starting with a heavy car that doesn't make a lot of power. You buy the car for what it is. You enjoy it for what it is. You want a cruiser, fine. Those things, you hop in that car, you drive it down to Florida, and you could probably be chilling at 90 miles an hour the entire time and have the best drive of your life. I wouldn't want to drive down to Florida in an Elantra. Good luck to you, bro. You can drive around in an XB like... that thing's kind of twitchy. You're driving, you're gonna drive.
That's chill. Hopefully it's.
You're not doing 90 cruising down to Florida.
Nah, my steering wheel shake. Well, I don't know.
See,
if that's, because,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's because of the car. I feel like that could be just. Maybe I need to get.
Nah, it's a small car. Small cars are naturally
at 80 miles an hour. My steering wheel should be shaking. If I bought the car brand new,
one thing. Listen, shaking's one thing.
That's what I'm saying.
But like the other thing also is that cars like that, they're so light, and then their wind resistance isn't the best. Like
it's terrible. Like I'm on bridges, and so it's like yeah, you're fighting.
The car wanders a lot. You're fighting a lot. It's called white knuckling because you're gripping the steering wheel. But like other cars that are grand touring cars are like, highway cars. Those you love driving them on the highway because you could be doing 90 or 100 and the thing doesn't feel like you don't feel it. Like the thing is just cruising through the air. The very slight steering input. Like it's a really nice drive. I would like to drive one of those down. I would not want to be in your position.
It's just a one way, man.
It is a one way.
So you telling me to pick up a 7 Series and drive down to Florida?
I mean, you might like it. You might like it.
So there's no mechanical issues with a 7 Series.
They have all their problems. They have all their problems because they come with the M62s. So like those engines were a little better revised, but they all have coolant problems, head gasket issues. It's really all issues that come from the owners of the cars. If these people did their oil changes on time, or if they did their coolant flushes or whatever, the cars would be way more reliable. But the problem is that people don't maintain their cars. And then they just pass it on to the next 5th or 6th owner. And next thing you know, you're like, oh, these cars suck. No, the car don't suck. It's just the people that maintain it.
So that's pretty much what most people know BMW for is from these years of people not doing their oil changes and having issues.
People just don't do their maintenance, man. And like we talked about on the last episode with the oil change stuff. Yeah, but it's true. What's really interesting about the oil change stuff is that people think, oh, I start my car every day and I warm it up, but I don't drive it and I shut it off. That's the worst thing you can do.
What?
That is the worst thing you can do is start your car in your driveway. Like a car that you don't drive, okay? A car that gets maybe 2,000 miles in a year, okay? Is you start in your driveway and then you shut it off after 20, 30 minutes or an hour.
What's wrong with that?
The oil doesn't get hot enough to burn off the condensation. That's the problem. the engine's cold the entire time and you go through the whole winter and you don't touch it, that's fine because you didn't touch it. It didn't get hot and cold. But when the engine heats up and then it cools down, it attracts water, it attracts moisture, it builds it. Think about it, if you took a frozen bottle of liquor out the freezer and you put it on the counter, in a little while, it's going to warm up and then it's going to have that condensation on it. It's going to pull it right out of the air, right inside the engine. It goes into the oil and it does nothing but contaminate your oil with water. But if you drive your car, the oil temperature gets at 200 degrees, 220 degrees, whatever, and it burns off the condensation and then you're fine. So, lesson to everybody, drive your cars. Drive your cars.
Never knew that.
My mother has a Defender, okay? The new one, the twin turbo straight six. And my father thought it had a head gasket issue because he took the oil cap off one day and he saw milky residue on it. And he's like, man, I gotta bring this into the dealership. It's no good. So he brings it in, and when he brought it in, he was talking to me on the phone. He told me, and I said, "Did you drive the car for like 4 or 5 hours?" He's like, "No." He's like, "No, I just brought it to the dealership, dropped it off." I said, "My mother drives from her home to her business, and it's less than a mile round trip. So the car starts, it runs for 5 minutes, it gets to her business, and then 10 hours later, she'll hop in it and drive that same 5 minutes back home.
Right.
It never gets hot enough to burn off the condensation. So I told him, I'm like, listen, take that thing out every weekend or every other weekend, whatever, and drive it for 3-4 hours and come back and check the cap. Sure enough, the dealership told him nothing's wrong. And then he started doing that, and he pops the cap off, and there's no milky residue because it's not attracting the water. And this is really only a problem in the wintertime because catch cans also, if if you have a turbo car with a catch can, with like an aftermarket catch can, you'll notice in the wintertime you get a lot of water in that catch can because you get a lot of vapor because of it burning it all off and because of the condensation that's building up.
Right.
So, that's very important. Drain your catch cans and drive your cars. You got to make sure your oil's hot enough always. So
then you got to make sure your oil is hot enough always. That means that when you jump in your car, should you warm it up before you drive it?
There's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of debate about it. Me personally, I always warm up and then drive. But there are people. Sometimes you don't have the luxury. Sometimes you start it and just start driving away right away. I don't think that can be good for the transmission. The engine, I don't think so much because when you start it, the oil pressure is always higher because the oil's thicker because it's cold. But I always like to warm up cars. That's just me. Some cars come with like a rev limiter, like a warm up limiter.
Yeah,
that it has to get to a certain temperature before it gets to that point.
Yeah, the XB's like that. It's got like super advanced features.
That thing is, ahead of its time.
Shout out to Scion, man, for making such a futuristic.
Shout out to Toyota because it's a Toyota at the end of the day.
Well, Scion's not around anymore, man.
Yeah, well, Toyota was trying to market to teenagers, and it worked well for a little while. Right. It was cool at the time because you can buy the car with like different lights or bumpers or whatever. They had all that stuff.
It was like that
different
Kia Soul with the hamster and all that stuff happening.
That's literally what you have, bro.
Yeah. No, I know. It's cool.
But you didn't have the hamster. You're right. You didn't have the hamster. You're not the hamster.
People always get that confused.
Yeah?
Yeah.
They got to put some respect on your name because that's not cool. But I'm sorry for completely skipping an entire section.
No, you didn't skip. We're on to E46.
Yeah, so E46. E46 is very similar to E36 and as far as suspension geometry goes. The rear is the same. You had a bunch of different engines. In the States, you couldn't get it with a 4-cylinder though. It was really just a bunch of different 6-cylinder engines, but the issue was that all the non-M 6-cylinder engines that it came with were all aluminum. So they had so many issues. They had oil consumption issues. They would misfire. They would blow head gaskets left and right. They were really not reliable at all. And then you had the S54, which is a good engine, but like I said, it has a very complicated VANOS setup where it has kind of like a mechanical fuel pump, but on the camshaft, it has because mechanical fuel pumps, they're like driven off the camshaft, right? So the E46 VANOS setup has a oil pump on the camshaft.
Okay.
So you have your normal oil pump at the bottom, and then you have your VANOS oil pump up here, because for the VANOS to work properly, it needs something like I think it was like 100 bar or something like that. It's like a lot of oil pressure that it needs to run it properly. And it's just an over-engineered system. I think that they could have toned it down a little bit and it would have had a better setup.
Yeah.
You know, and it wouldn't have been as complicated, but hey, that's history. It is what it is.
I used to want one coming out of high school, I think it was. Spoke about it a few times already with Horsepower Freaks. They had their kit for that car, and there were some boosted ones on YouTube that I was looking at earlier.
Horsepower Freaks was the biggest joke to ever happen. Let me tell you something about Horsepower Freaks. Horsepower Freaks went out of business.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And Horsepower Freaks went out of business because they built shitty kits. And they, you know, some people will tell you, oh, it's because someone that worked there embezzled 30 or 40 grand or whatever. That's not why they went out of business, bro. They went out of business because they were building really bad turbo kits. And every single car that went out the door came back on a trailer or a flatbed. You know? Like, the problem with those engines is that they're so high compression. They have the ITBs. They're very complicated, whatever. The turbo kits that go on those, and people sell HPF turbo kits today, and they're like, oh, this is the best thing on the planet. It is not, bro. I've installed HPF turbo kits, and I hate every second of it. It's like the way the motor mounts line up is stupid. The way all the oil lines are is horrible. The things never run right. They don't make a lot of power.
Why do you need motor mounts?
Just because of the way they put the turbocharger, they mount the turbocharger like really low.
So you have to change the motor mount to accommodate for that?
Yeah, okay. The motor mount, because it actually changes the angle of the motor, like how the motor mount is holding on to the subframe. Like it's all the geometry of the motor mount.
Yeah,
it's because with that, like they had to put a lower mount on it so that the intake could come straight and up. Okay, because the motor mount kind of would be right in front of the turbocharger. But they had a few nice pieces, like the intake plenum that they had. It was really nice, you know, and some of their manifolds are okay. But like I said, it's just like the entire kits in general, it was a robbery. It was like 100 grand to build an E46 at the time. And you sit there and you're like, bro, this is what people charge for twin turbo R8 builds right now. You know, that made no sense to me. What's crazy is that right at the time that they started to go, like they were getting rocky, Mike Radowski, Maxim PSI, he built his own turbo kit for the E46. And it was something like, it was like 15 grand installed, out the door, tuned, ready to rock. And HPF is here selling kits for like 50 or 100 grand, 50 grand for a turbo kit and 100 grand for a built motor with a turbo kit. And you're like, why would I get that when this already outperforms it? And then he went ahead and he built his car, and his car went like crushed whatever quarter mile record that they had, you know, and they had like this crazy drag car. It was orange. You know what? The biggest disappointment in me when I used to like BMWs was going online and seeing that Miles Gringo Tegra fucked up that HPF orange car that makes like 1100 horsepower with his Integra that made like 600 at the time. He absolutely mollywopped that car. And I sat there and I'm like, bro, that Integra, he says it makes like 600 and I believe it. And that HPF car, they touted all over the forums that it makes over 1,000 and I believe it. You know, so it's like, why? How is that so much faster? Bro, I'm telling you, that was the biggest disappointment, was watching that that orange. My biggest disappointment was watching that orange HPF car get absolutely clapped by Miles's Integra when it was like way back in the day. He's been in the game for so long, and he's been advancing the Honda game for years. And he's been doing a great job at it. You know, I've seen him in person a few times. I said hello. He's awesome, dude. And I'm telling you, bro, when I saw that, that's when I was like, you know what? E46s are trash. And that's it. So I'm not a fan. Some people are, and that's okay. Yeah. But when that happened, man, I was like, man, screw these cars. Because then it's like everybody I know, it's like, man, you like BMWs, bro? It's fucking Honda just clapped it. Whatever. So that's E46s. And then
what about the subframe though? The rear subframe, because I know
they were horrible. During that era, BMW was gluing all the body panels together.
They were gluing them?
Yeah. Yeah. They were like
He's like, yeah.
They were gluing them. Yeah, it's panel bonding adhesive is what it is. Which like now all this stuff is like actually figured out where like the actual adhesive is like aerospace quality, whatever. But back then it was like, let's say it was good in testing and good for crash tests or whatever, but a lot of the Northeast cars with the metal expanding and contracting, it would split. So like in a lot of northeast cars, you saw the seam split, and then you would see weird things happen. Like the subframe would like tear out of the car. Really weird stuff would happen. They rectified a lot of those cars though. Like they were like they did like a recall, they fixed them and stuff. Okay. But if you didn't get it done under the recall, you were screwed.
Yeah, if you buy used E46 and that wasn't just the E46, like the M3. It was
it was all of them pretty much. Yeah. You know what's crazy is like the E60 that came out after that. Those cars were also like that, with a lot of panel bonding adhesive. I seen a lot of accidents with E60s where the entire car is like split apart. Like it's like you see like the engine out of the car, and like you see the right apron and the left apron, and everything is just split out of the car. The car is glued together. And you see this stuff and you're like, I mean, okay, this guy crashed his car doing 160 miles an hour. Okay.
Yeah.
Like that's probably why. But at the same time, it's like, why is the car just disintegrating when it crashes like that? I mean, at the same time, you shouldn't be driving like that.
So if you have happen to come across a good deal on an E46, what can you do to build it? What are the limitations on it? How much can you make on it? You
can do, a lot of people do like a nice drift build on E46. A lot of people actually swap in iron block engines to turbo them in E46s. Okay. A lot of people turbo them too, but like they're right around like that 400 or 500 mark. Above that, like they have a lot of problems because they just can't get the heads to stay on the engines. But they drive really well because it's essentially a technical upgrade engine from this. So like they have a simpler dual VANOS setup than the M3.
Okay.
And that dual VANOS setup is better than the VANOS setup that comes on these. Like it's much better for drivability and fuel economy. And the turbo kits all bolt on the same way to the E46 also. Not the M3, but to the non-M engines. Yeah. The head pattern for the headers and stuff is all the same. So like you can take a turbo kit from E36 and bolt it on the E46 and it'll work. But we skipped E39 actually. That's one of my favorites because you can get an iron block E39 if you got an early model and you can turbo that. And it comes with the same driveline that comes in the 328 E36. Comes with a ZF 5-speed tranny, which is good, and the iron block 2.8, which is also good. And it's an early model. So I like those cars a lot. That's like a cool little, if you want a turbo one, get an iron block E39. Like if you don't want to get an E36 and you want a little bigger car, it's a heavier car, but like you'll have a lot of fun with it. So around that era, BMW would, swap all the same engines into all different cars. Yeah. So like all the E46 engines, because there's like an overlap. So the E39 started while the E36 was still in production. Okay. And then as the E39 is going through production and the E36 phased out and the E46 comes in, all the engines that came in the E46 were then dropped into the E39. So then you had all of those engines that were in that, like you had all the E46 aluminum block engines in them. But the other side is that they also did facelift all over the car. So they did LCI. So like different headlights, different interior, different taillights, different everything. To the point where you don't want to get an early E39 because it's so dated. Like the lights really look old. Like the car does look that much older, but it has the better driveline, so that's like a toss up. You can put all the newer stuff on the older one, but like you're buying stuff twice, which sucks.
So between the E36 and the E46, right? You said they're basically the same chassis.
Chassis wise, like suspension wise, suspension geometry. Right. They have the same Z-Link rear, I believe is what it's called, and then the front is normal McPherson strut. But they also they have a shock and a spring separate in the rear. They don't have like a true coilover setup in the rear. Okay. Which does for some really, really interesting handling characteristics. Some people like to do like a full coilover conversion on the rear. I'm not a big fan. I just don't like the way it handles afterwards. I do like the way it handles like that, like with upgraded suspension, with the factory suspension geometry. I'm a big fan of it.
The E36 was one of the best handling cars apparently around that time, correct?
Yeah, it was the best handling car of the 90s. There's actually a really good picture. If you get the chance, you gotta post it up. It is a picture of a Mark IV Supra, of a C5 Corvette, a Ferrari 355. I think there's a Dodge Viper in there also.
Viper.
Yeah. Horrible car.
Was there
beautiful
NSX?
car? But
NSX
horrible.
was in there?
NSX also. Yeah. Bunch of hero cars. And it said, the best handling car in America and like 5 or 7 others that look like they should be but aren't. And the best handling car was E36 at the time. And that was like all those car magazines that are all gone now. They all tested all these cars, all the heroes from the 90s, and lo and behold, the best handling one was the E36. And still to this day, I've driven a lot of those cars that were in that era. And I'm going to tell you, it is absolutely the best handling car. You got, perfect example, you've got Jordan RK Tunes. The man can drive whatever he wants. Okay, he's doing well for himself. Congratulations. He's built a good model and he stood behind it and he does a good product.
Right.
He's a good businessman. He has a twin turbo Huracan that makes 2,000 horsepower, whatever. But he'll still tell you his favorite car to drive is an E36 because it's the best driving car. Like, I don't, there's a reason it's out there. You know, it's one of the best driving cars and it feels like, it's hard to say. It just feels like really, really raw. Like you are connected to the road and the car is very neutral. Like it's going one way or if it's sliding, it wants to go the other way. Like it wants to fix itself. It wants to correct. So there's a lot of caster built into the car. And they're just very close to that 50-50 weight distribution. It's just, to me, it's one of the best cars and it always will be. It doesn't have to be the fastest car. It doesn't have to be the prettiest car.
Right.
But at the same time, I've always loved driving 36s. They're just very neutral in their driving ability, you know, in their driving capability. There's a lot of other cars too that kind of fall into that area. The E46 is very good too because it, like I said, has the same suspension geometry, but it is a heavier car and it is more refined.
Okay.
And in that, you lose some of that raw feeling that you get from that 90s car, you know?
Okay.
That feeling is nice. Everybody like, you know, baby, I like it raw. But at the end of the day, you know, it's what I like. I sometimes I like a more docile car, but sometimes, you know, I want the other. I want the other side also. So,
where did the Supra line up with the E36 back then, handling wise?
Handling wise,
Yeah.
I mean, it was a good car, but you know, front engine. But at the same time, I don't.
Because that's like a JDM, you know, icon, right?
It is, but it's a JDM icon because
for straight line.
It's a JDM icon because everybody makes 1,000 horsepower and they're like the fastest thing. And it's a great car and it's awesome and they're beautiful. I love the way they look. I've always loved the way they look. But no, handling wise, you know, you have a lot of other cars that were in that area. You had, you know, you would take an Integra. You would take a Civic, you know, you would take a Civic type car. All these cars handle great, you know, but you had a heavy twin turbo straight 6 car that just didn't have, you know, the best suspension geometry and that's it. At the end of the day, did they handle good? Yeah, maybe. But there was a reason why GTRs handle better. And there was a reason why you had a raggedy-ass AE86 that would handle better than all these cars.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that AE86 is a better car. No, it was just a lighter, better suspension geometry. AE86 has a solid rear axle. It's a solid axle in the rear. It is not IRS. And that car handled so good to the point where they made a freaking anime about it.
Yeah.
You know? And it was one of the best animes. Speaking of, they have a sequel to it.
Ghost?
Yes.
Yeah.
I watched that. I liked it a lot. It was actually really good. I like the writing.
There's an FRS in there, right?
Yeah.
Or it'd be FRS.
Yeah. The plot's a little crazy because ain't no FRS keeping up with no 911. But it was a cool show nonetheless. I like some animes. You know, I like some stuff like that.
DK spoke about that. I asked him about when I had the interview with him.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He.
Oh, that's right. You did interview that legend.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Actually, he signed this mic.
Did he?
Yeah. It's signed.
Damn, that's
You
cool.
can see it. Yeah.
Shoot, that is dope. That is really dope.
Yeah, I got him to sign it because I'll probably never see him again.
Probably never. No, that man's
He's
up
never
there,
in
bro.
the States.
That man's up there. That's crazy that you got that opportunity.
Yeah,
I feel honored, man, to even, you know, be in the same presence as someone who's, you know, seen it.
Oh,
like that.
stop it, man. Come on. You know, I'm just your average
bro, you've met a lot of you met a lot of like, you know, icons in the industry.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's, you know,
people
like,
you've probably seen, you know, that I honestly heard of or, you know, through shops and things like that, but I never thought that I'd be sitting with them. But it's much cooler when like you can appreciate it because you've been in the industry for a while.
I've been around it, you know.
Yeah.
I've been around it for a long time, and I've always just tried to always keep learning. You know, because
Same.
you know, like my professor from college always said, he's like, and this guy was very, very intelligent, and he was old, bro. And he told you, he's like, the day you think you know everything is the day that you stop learning. And sometimes people are like, oh, I'm the best, I'm this, I'm that, whatever. That person's not learning anymore, and very closed off. But you always, and you do it very well. You always learn from everybody that you interview.
I try to.
You try to.
When I edit.
Yeah.
That's the only time I learn, but that's just how it is.
But that's a good quality to have. And I feel like a lot more people should be trying to learn as much as they can, whether it be about the projects that you're doing or just something that'll help you in your everyday life. At the end of the day, just trying to better yourself or trying to become the best version of yourself is something that everybody can do. And I can relate to that all day.
You think if he didn't say that to you, that you'd have sort of an arrogance about knowing?
I was very arrogant when he said it. I was very arrogant when he said it. And sometimes, I do, not now anymore, but back then I used to be arrogant. I was, whatever. At the time I was a 20-year-old kid who, knew everything.
Yeah.
Everybody hits that stage.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you get back down to zero and, you change in ways that make you the best version of yourself. And everybody should be striving for that. Whether it be in cars or, at work or at your home, whatever, family, everybody should be striving for that. Because everybody doing that together is how the world is going to heal itself. Yeah. It ain't going to heal itself because one person became president. It ain't going to heal itself because one person's donating XYZ dollars.
Yeah.
And that might be a little too political or whatever for the audience. But at the end of the day, I feel like, I feel like car enthusiasts are a different breed. Car enthusiasts, like, you go to a car show or whatever, and or like a meet, whatever it is, and it's always different types of people.
Yeah,
it's never like one race. It's never like one unless it's like a bunch of Hondas with the house speakers on the top. That's different. Those are my people. But I feel like the car community doesn't care. Every time you go out and it's like, oh, whatever, like when I went to Lime Rock, I meet old white dudes, whatever. I meet black dudes, whatever. It doesn't matter. I meet Asian people. It does not matter. Everybody's just an enthusiast and they love cars. That's it. Mm-hmm. That is like the one common thing that brings them together. People should be more open-minded. And that's it.
Yeah. All right. So we have E46, which cleared up pretty much, right? If you want to build one.
No, I don't. If you want to build one, man, you go for your old motor cars. E46 is a really good car for a swap because the engine bay is a little larger than E36, so you can fit a lot of different engines. A lot of people LS swap E46s.
Man, I can't stand. I'm tired of these LS swaps, bro.
Yeah, it is what it is, man.
It's a good platform, but it's just overdone.
But turbo setups, S54 is the way to go. Or if you're gonna swap in an E36 engine, you could do that too.
Okay. There you go.
But people are doing newer stuff. People are doing S55s. People are doing N55s.
Right.
People are doing M54s.
B58s.
We'll see B58s. We'll see S58s into all those cars.
E65, E66.
It's the worst car on the planet.
Oh.
If you were ever looking at buying one of those cars, I'm gonna tell you, the viewer, right now.
The 7 Series.
That era of 7 Series was the worst car ever made. I don't care if you find an Alpina. I don't care if whatever you find, do not buy it. Do not. Run away. It smokes. It burns oil. It's $1 million to fix. It's a piece of shit. It's the worst car ever built.
Worst car ever built?
It might be battling for the worst car ever built. The Pinto is one of the worst cars ever built. This is as bad as a Pinto.
The Pinto?
The Ford Pinto is one of the worst cars ever made.
Is that the car that's like...
It's the car that's wider than it is longer. It's a chode. Yes, that's the car. The Pinto.
Is that the one that catches on fire? Is that?
They all catch on fire, bro.
Yeah,
all those cars from that era are fucking spontaneously combust.
My grandpa told me about that car.
Yeah.
There's actually one that's like not too far from my house.
And you know what's crazy? They have a cult following. They have a cult following.
The Pinto is the
Ford
worst
Pinto.
car.
Yes, Ford
It's
Pinto.
carbureted, right?
I don't know, bro. That thing, I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't tell you.
Yo,
I just Googled Ford Pinto, and Ford Pinto explosion came up as a as a suggestion. Okay, so you might be right. They do explode, spontaneously combust.
Yeah,
Ford Pinto.
My grandpa told me that years ago.
No, the 7 Series is 7 Series is worse than a Pinto. I'll say it right now.
No, which year 7 Series you said?
01 to 08.
E60, E65, and
E65 is a forgotten car because I forgot all about it. Because, you know, like the human mind does this thing where, like, if you go through something traumatic or something very bad happens or some very bad information happens, it kind of just pushes it away and you forget about it.
Yeah.
I forgot about that car because it's horrible. So I'll tell you that right now.
Okay. So if you guys have a 7 Series out there, or if you have an E65,
No one
E66,
watching this has that car. I'm telling you right now. No one watching this has that car. If you have that car, it is not running right. If you have that car, it's either smoking or it's burning oil. I know for a fact. I know it. It's like a proven fact.
Yo.
It's like it's certified. Take it to the bank, check it, deposit whatever you want. That's it.
Okay, it's all right. So we're gonna move on from the. I'm sorry, guys.
All good, all good.
5 Series, E60, E61.
I don't really like them. They have like this weird door chime. It's like I don't like the sound they make. Some people like them. I kind of like the way they looked. The problem is that, well, every engine that they came with was trash, except for the N54 cars. They were okay. And
Every engine they came with was trash?
except for the N54 cars, which were kind of okay, and the M5 engine.
Oh, okay.
The
I was gonna
V10.
say.
Well, no, the V10 is a very good engine.
Okay.
The problem is that the chassis sucks. It's such a heavy car, and like I said, those are like the panel bonding adhesive,
Yeah.
where like the car splits into a million pieces. And then on top of that, they also had SMG transmissions, which sucked. SMG is not like DCT or like DSG. SMG is a manual transmission with pumps and levers that shift the gears for you. So like, imagine you were teaching somebody's grandmother to drive manual. That's how fast SMG shifts. There's no other way to put it. SMG is like, you hit the lever, for SMG, and then you gotta wait. And then you can like look outside the window, check your watch, look at your phone, change the radio station, and then lift off the throttle, and then it'll shift into the next gear. SMG is the worst.
E46 had an SMG also, right?
Also the worst. Yeah, it was just as bad. And even E36 is also.
Yeah. Oh, really?
In Europe, if you got an E36 M3 Euro, like the very, very late models, they came with SMG, and it was the worst version of SMG because it was like they just figured it out and they're like, yo, this is really cool. Let's put it in this car. And it was like
terrible.
It does not shift, bro. It is so slow, and everything breaks in them always, and stuff always goes bad. The only good thing about SMG is that you can convert the transmission to a manual. So you can take that SMG transmission down, rip out all the automatic stuff, and then machine it, and so it accepts like the springs and the levers and stuff. So it's a manual, and put a manual shifter on it and put it in the car. The downside is that you have to code the car for it, and you have to like make some wiring changes to it and possibly some tune changes. So all that stuff.
That car didn't come in a manual?
No, it did.
Okay,
but they're extremely rare. Extremely rare. So like if you find a manual M5, that's like a holy grail car. M5 V10 manual sedan, super super rare, holy grail all day.
And what transmission was that?
It was a 6-speed get rag. I think it was a get rag 6-speed. Yeah.
Okay. That's a great transmission and it holds power. So what are those V10s capable of power wise?
A lot. They have some supercharger kits. Gintani did some supercharger kits on them. I think some of them made over 800 horsepower. Yeah, they don't make a lot of torque, but they do make a lot of power. It's a 10-cylinder engine. It's not impressive.
Right.
It's not impressive because it makes 80 horsepower per cylinder. That's like you have plenty of people have Lambos. Okay, plenty of people have Lambos and R8s, whatever, and they have their V10 engines. And they go, I can make 1,000 horsepower on a stock motor. That's not impressive. It makes 100 horsepower per cylinder. That's not impressive. If you have a 4-cylinder that makes 100 horsepower per cylinder, that's a 400 horsepower 4-cylinder.
Yeah.
That's run of the mill. That's normal. You know, even if you have a 2,000 horsepower V10, is it impressive? Yeah, it's 2,000 horsepower, okay, but it's not. It's expected of that engine. It's 200 horsepower per cylinder.
Yep. Again,
if you have an 800 horsepower 4-cylinder, that's impressive, right? Because you got, all right, that's a lot of power for 4-cylinder. That's just working.
Right.
But once again, everything is polarized these days. Everything is like glazed over. You go to the track and you see 1,800 horsepower 4-cylinders, or you see 800 or 900 horsepower all motor 4-cylinders, and it's like, that is extremely impressive. But then you look at, the 10-cylinder stuff and they work, they're fast, okay. But it's expected of that engine. The engine is $50,000. Like a stock Lamborghini V10 engine from like a new Huracan or whatever. Yeah. The engine's $50,000. If I'm paying $50,000 for an engine, it better be able to do that. Like obviously with some parts, it better be able to do that.
Right.
But then the problem is you blow it up, you shoot a rod, you're $50,000 out the hole again. It's an expensive game. It is. Some people just ain't ready for it.
A lot of people ain't.
I feel, but you know what? You know what's interesting though, is that the best engine design for longevity and reliability is an inline six.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because if other designs were better, why is it that 18-wheelers and car haulers and all these huge trucks that have infinite space in front of the cab, why do they come with straight sixes? I think the real reason is because it's easier to service.
Okay.
Because it's less complicated. You have induction on one side and you have the heat on the other side. So
okay.
And then on top of that, the crankshaft design, you have one connecting rod for every journal versus every V engine where you have two connecting rods on one journal. Or the other thing also is the mains are holding only the cylinders right next to it. So you have one cylinder in the front, one cylinder in the back. And the main journal's holding each cylinder. Fine. On a V engine, especially ones that have a lot of horsepower, you have these 4-6 bolt main engines where they're holding two cylinders in front and two cylinders in the back. And they are older engines. They were 2 bolt main engines when they made a lot of horsepower. They would shoot the crankshaft out the bottom of the engine, And then they came up with 4 bolt main engines, and then stuff took off and it got really false. The 6 bolt stuff is crazy, and they have block girdles that are really crazier than that. But I feel like the most reliable design is a straight six because of that.
Any straight six.
Any straight six.
Okay.
Just because of the like I said, the engineering of the crankshaft, because each connecting rod is on one crank journal. So like if something happens, you can repair it. If something happens, like you can service that one journal. You don't have to service every single one.
Got you.
Or like, if you trash a V8 journal, like you have to resize the rod and the journal. And then a lot of times the crank is trash. You have to throw it out. Because it's like, you don't do that to one. On a 6-cylinder, you can do it to one and have an oversized bearing on one. Fine, whatever. Like you're repairing the engine. It's not a big deal. But on a V8, like nobody's cutting every single journal.
Yeah.
Or like any V engines. No one's cutting every single journal. Everybody's just going to buy a new crankshaft.
And same for V6s.
Yeah. V engines, V6, V8, V12, V10s, whatever. All that stuff is, like I said, it's more cylinders.
Right.
But whenever you're looking at the potential of like a connecting rod or a piston or whatever, you want to look at it at horsepower per cylinder. So like a very, very, very high output engine is one that'll do like 250 horsepower per cylinder is a lot. But like those 300 horsepower per cylinders and up, those are like the strongest parts in those engines. So like if you see a connecting rod and a company says, oh, this connecting rod's good for 1,800 horsepower, it never did 1,800 horsepower. Like it never did it. But if you see an engine that's like, people rate that stuff and it'll be 1,800 horsepower for a 6-cylinder.
Yeah.
Right? Which is 300 horsepower per cylinder. But the 4-cylinders that are making 300 horsepower per cylinder, they don't use those connecting rods. They use different connecting rods. You understand? So like that's where it comes from. Nobody uses an H-beam connecting rod for a 300 horsepower 4-cylinder. People use an I-beam or an aluminum rod engine design. An aluminum rod's not even a good thing to use on a street car anyway, because like you have to service them. They stretch. They're not. Aluminum's not a good material for stuff like that.
A lot of the drag people use those, right?
Yeah. Because it's the fastest thing.
Right.
But also a lot of drag people, they pull their engine apart every 4 or 5 hits. I couldn't do that, bro. I'm too tired. Shit, my car's been apart for a while. I just, I put it to the side.
What are you telling, bro? I'm on jack stands since last year almost.
Man, I hear you, brother.
Yeah. So V10, we're good with that, pretty much. If you talked about building that.
No, there's nobody builds them.
Nobody even has them.
The V10 is essentially the V8 that comes in the E90, just with 2 more cylinders. Like that's the layout. So all the parts are pretty much interchangeable. And those engines have a huge problem. that they break when it makes too much torque. Same thing with the V10. So like they don't make a lot of torque because of that. So people put superchargers on them and stuff, but like nobody turbos those things.
And what about the N54?
N54 is a good engine, but the problem is everything else around the engine. The ECU is trash.
But that had an N54.
Yeah. They came with a N54 twin turbo. You know, you can mod them. They make decent power, but the cars, they just had like, you know, it was like a quirky car. Like the years and like, you know, as far as like interior trim and stuff like that goes, like not a lot of people like them because it's like such a big car.
I thought it was cool. I think it was one of the nicer looking ones.
I like them too, but you know, not a lot of people did.
So we got E90 and then E63, 64.
Yeah, E90 is good. I like E90s a lot, but they came with a lot of different, you know, they came with a few different engines. Nothing really noticeable other than the turbo engines really, or the all motor V8 in the E90. So, you know, the E90 is a very good car, but they're heavy. They're heavy. The early models, they're like the interior electronics were a little dated. The late models, they have better stuff. But they're really, really nice cars. The E90 is like, E90 M3 is one of the best sounding cars you can get. It is a 8,400 RPM V8 that just sounds phenomenal. Does it make a lot of power? No. But it wasn't made for that. What I said earlier about the E30 M3 and the 325 M20 being faster in a straight line, the E90 was the next time it happened. You had the V8, which was great sounding, but it wasn't very fast in a straight line. And then you had the 335, which if you did like a stage 1 or JB4 on it, it was faster than the M3, you know? And then that was like a weird time.
Yeah.
But then you had every single person, like it happens today. Every single person that leases a brand new BMW and they do a downpipe in the tune and they think they're the fastest person on the planet. And then you have Steph Mods of Fame calling them out on the internet for 3 hours with a $100,000 Hellcat. Like, bro, no one is doing it, dude. No one, like, the community has always been like this. And it's very unfortunate to say, every single time a new chassis comes out, for those 2 or 3 years, a bunch of people that are just not really enthusiasts, they get into these cars and they put the downpipes in the tunes and they think they're the fastest people on the planet. And then they're out of the cars and those cars go back to dealerships or they're in the junkyard because they got totaled, people crashed them because they were inexperienced, whatever. And then they get into being into real cars or whatever. Or they get another one, they do it right. But like a downpipe tune car is not going to be the Hellcat. It's just not, especially a red eye. Like people don't understand how fast that is. A red eye on a tire you really can't compete with it very much.
Yeah.
You know, you have to do like the race gas or the port injection and like they sneak like a bigger turbo on it and it's like, oh no, it's still stock, but it's a pure turbo. Like everybody does it, bro. You're not fooling anybody. We all know. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. You get one of those cars and then you trap 135 or 138 miles an hour. It's like, we know what you did.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, there's that. But that's an unfortunate side effect of the community. Like the first time I saw that was E90s because that's like around the time, you know, like that 2007, 2008 time was like when I was really getting into the scene. And I go out and all I see is a bunch of idiots with these cars and everybody's a tool bag. Bro, I remember so many people being tool bags during this time, and I'm like, you know, a few of the people were cool, but I met so many of these guys, and I'm like, yo, this is not it. And that was it. That was it. And then those people were not enthusiasts. I know for a fact they weren't enthusiasts, you know, because they weren't for the love of the car. They just wanted to be the fastest guy on the street. You know, and it was like the first time BMW came out with a turbo engine since the 80s, you know?
Yeah.
So that was it. They came back out with a turbo engine and people jumped right on it, which, you know, it brought them a lot of sales.
And that was with the N54, N55.
Yeah, N54. N55 is a much better engine. And people are going to hate me for saying that also. But the N55 is an S55, just like not closed deck, you know, and not as hot cams, you know, stuff like that, single turbo, whatever. But you can build an N55 and have a very reliable car. I did one for a friend of mine named Miguel, and it was a closed deck N55 M2, and the car had a single turbo. We did a 64, I think it was a 64R on it from Boost Lab, or a 68, I forget, one of those two. But it had a Ricky Bobby manifold, like tubular manifold and all this, and it sounded just like his other friend, Danny, who has a single turbo F82. The freaking car sounds the same because the engine is the same. The crankshaft, all that stuff is pretty much the same. It's just like open deck block versus closed deck block. You know, it's like the Subaru world or like CSS. That car is a CSS. So the M2 I did, the N55, if you CSS the block, is very strong.
Okay.
But with open deck, just like the M54s, they CSS them also. But those cars have they have all their problems. If you put a standalone on an N54, great car, great engine. It'll do very good things.
Okay.
But like right up until like that 1,100 horsepower mark, after that, they all have their problems. But after that, we got F10. F10, you had the V8 stuff, which was cool. You had the twin turbo V8. The N63 non-TU was probably the second worst engine BMW ever made was the N63 non-TU. That engine was so bad that they blew up left and right to the point where if you have one of those cars and it needs an engine, if you call BMW and give them the VIN number, they say, no problem, we'll get you an engine. It's $3,000, but you have to give us your old one. So instead of doing like a class action or like a full buyback on all the cars, they did like it's like a goodwill repair where like they're trying to help out as best they can because a full complete engine for $3,000 is not like they're not making any money on it. They know it's a loss, but the engine is, it's not the best. But what's interesting though is that engine has one ECU and the TU version and the S63 and then all the versions after that, they're all reliable for the most part. But they all have a bunch of extra cooling hoses that are like a pain in the butt to work with. Yeah. They're a little over-engineered. But the TU engines have two ECUs, one for each bank. And those are much more reliable. So maybe it was just that the one computer couldn't handle it properly. Yeah. And then BMW's like, well, that's it.
What about the S63?
The S63 is a really, really cool engine. They do have their drawbacks. They have weak connecting rods, but it's not even that they have weak connecting rods. It's just that they make a lot of torque. It's a very compact engine that then those turbos come on, they make a lot of power. I remember when I worked in my old shop, we did a N63 5 Series that was all-wheel drive, and it had pure turbos on it and meth, and that thing, RK had tuned it. Okay. And it made like 760 wheel horse and like 780 foot-pounds of torque from a stock valve-covered oil pan N63. And this thing ran hard. That was right when the F90 came out. And the F90 like was doing like a 10.9 quarter mile stock, right? This car did a 10.8 quarter mile or 10.9. It's like the same exact thing. And you had a 550. It wasn't even M5. It was a 550. Yeah. Full luxury car, all-wheel drive. What's interesting is that the M5 came with the DCT training, but the 550 came with the ZF8. And then what did BMW do when the F90 came out? They dropped the DCT and they put in the ZF8. So essentially, if you buy an F10 550 TU, you have like a baby F90 M5 because the driveline is the same. Oh, wow. Essentially the same. The S63 is a better engine, but, for that 650, 700 horsepower mark, you're going to have the same thing. Very good looking car. I like the F10 a lot.
People have asked about that, and I could say they've never
F10s are dope, but F10s also came with N55s, So you can do like a single turbo, but it's a heavier car. They move out pretty good though. Right. They're fun. They sound great. N55 is a really good engine. But they handle very well. It's a little too heavy of a car to really mod them a lot,
Is the M5 like a cheat code? Because those cars are pretty fast, right?
M5s are fast cars. But the problem is that it's big.
Yeah.
They make a lot of power and people build them and they make 1,000, whatever. But you don't really hear too much of those cars. The problem is that the DCT tranny slips. So like the clutch setup is a pain. You can't launch those transmissions. The transmission is not good for launching. Yeah. Every single F80 M3 that tried to go for a record with a quarter mile, gone through like 4 or 5 transmissions, and they always break, because it's the same reason why every single time you go to the drag strip and they have the GTR class, everybody rolls their eyes because the GTR class is going to break 3 or 4 times before they finish the entire class. A DCT tranny drops the clutch to launch the car. It is not a good way of launching the car. Automatic transmissions, this is the reason why, it's the reason why Mac Kimbo, put
Put a
an auto in his car
TH400,
because he's gone through so many transmissions, and he knows that if you preload the car on an automatic or on a trans brake, whatever, you're going to be able to launch the car and actually go rounds with the car instead of having to drop a transmission. That sucks.
Yeah.
That absolutely sucks. For drag racing, bro, it is what it is. Automatic transmissions are better. It is what it is. But that's the thing. It's like we've gotten to this point with all new BMWs where all everybody cares about is a quarter mile time. Nobody cares about the driving of the car. You know, no one cares about what the car feels like or how it handles on the street or when you hit the turns or twisties. Like, no one cares about that. All everybody wants is a 1,000 horsepower car that's going to 60 to 130 better than this guy and drag race better than this guy.
With that being said, it's pretty much how majority of the newer platforms are, you're saying, basically.
Some
now.
of them are,
It's
yeah.
G-series.
I mean, there's a lot of, you know, I did a few F80s. Me and my shop, we did a few F80s that I like, that I really, really like a lot. You know, when they get to like that, you get to like that 750 to 850 wheel horsepower mark, they're really, really good. You know, beyond that, you're going to be breaking a lot of transmissions and stuff. But the engine is very good. Jordan was right when he said that the S55 is better than the B58. And people hate that, but it's true. Those cars don't blow head gases. The engine is very good. Once you pin the crankshaft and you have to fix the crank hub, the engine is, you know, excellent. You make 1,100 horsepower on that engine, and you don't really break a sweat. Damn. They flow great. They make really good power. They're reliable. But you know, there wasn't a good transmission behind it. If you take an S55 car and you make 1,100 horsepower and you put a ZF8 behind it, you're gonna break all those guys' records straight up.
But Jordan didn't do that, right?
No, he did it with a DCT.
Yeah, right.
You know,
that'd be cool to see though.
Yeah, there's a few guys out there that's doing it. There's a few all-wheel drive ones I saw that are doing it with an S55. You know, it's dope. I like seeing the community bring it all up.
Right.
You know, a lot of the, you know, rest in peace to Dre, man. He was he was the first all-wheel drive guy out there that put those cars on the map. You know, and it's a real shame. It is a real shame, and you know,
yeah,
it sucks. It sucks to lose somebody in the community always. But you know, he pioneered it for a lot of people. And I feel like if he didn't, then, you know, a lot of these guys wouldn't even be where they are with their all-wheel drive cars. He was out there every freaking day racing that car.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a time, man.
Yeah. Rest in peace to Dre.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's pretty much. I mean, I'm sure there's tons. We can go on for hours about.
Yeah,
BMW
we can go on
stuff.
for hours with BMWs, bro. But we don't.
Yeah. But the newer stuff, I mean, we pretty much covered on other podcasts.
Dude,
already,
you've done a bunch of those podcasts with all the newer cars, and you know what? There's a TikTok video for everybody that wants to mod the new ones, man. But you know, all the other ones, I'm there. I work on the new ones too. But at the end of the day, I like going from F80 and back. I do some B58 stuff, and I do like it, but you know, I know a lot of these guys, they always hop on a new turbo kit or new this, new that. It's like, build your car to enjoy it. Stop building your car for other people. You know, I tell people all the time, don't get wrapped up in horsepower numbers, because, you know, chances are if you have a properly set up 650, 700 horsepower car that's like 31 or 3,500 pounds max, you can enjoy the hell out of it. And don't let somebody tell you that you're not.
Yeah.
Don't let somebody tell you, oh, pack it up, you're done. Like, you know, it's food, whatever. At the end of the day, bro, not everybody, you know, not everything
Pack it up, you're done, it's food.
Yeah, pack it up, you're done, it's food. I want to build so many cars. And not every car I want to build has to be 1,000 horsepower monster. I want to do a rotary. You know, I want to do a rotary car. I want to do, you know, an 07K car with like a, you know, with that engine. I would love to do like a GT4 Cayman. That car is super cool.
Yeah, I
see, really good handling car. And like, I seen some people do superchargers on them, but like a turbo on that would like, to make like 600 or 550 would be dope. You know, that would be like, it's not a lot of big power bump, but it's like enough to get it right to where it would be like a GT3 RS is like sweating, you know? Building something like that is dope, and I would love to do it, you know, but everything in due time.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, my brother. Thank you. I appreciate it.
To...
Good luck in Florida once again. Yeah. You know, I hope it goes very well, and I'm sure to check you out down there when I pop in.
If you ever go to Florida, probably not, but we'll see.
No, I go to Florida. You know, I dabble.
Yeah. If you do come down that way, or if you're going to South Carolina, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah,
I'll
North
probably
Carolina.
swing up that way as
Z-Max,
well once the
Z-Max.
car is done.
Oh, hell yeah. You got to bring that shit around, bro.
I'm not gonna probably race it, but until I get a better transmission.
You
but,
will.
you know,
Don't worry. You will. I'm
we'll
sure
see.
you will.
But yeah, so if you can, let the viewers and listeners know where to find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Francis Von Louis or on my shop page, which is Southside Motorsports Inc. And then also I do have a YouTube channel where I will be posting a lot more content on my E36, and that is the Framos 318.
Are you actually gonna post, bro?
Yeah, I will this time. I promise.
Come on,
I
man.
promise. I did. I kind of did this room
And
so
you
I
got
can
some,
do it.
I saw some videos. You had some good content. You
I
were
built
talking
a
about the
few.
cars.
I did a few, bro. I did a few.
Yeah, bro. The good
did a
thing
few.
about Frank is that you can listen to him talk for hours.
Oh,
About
I'm
cars,
sorry,
so.
bro. We've been talking for 3 hours.
No,
here.
in a good way. In a good way. So yeah, check out his channel. Make sure you guys head over to his YouTube channel if you guys are interested in learning more about BMWs and seeing the projects that he's working on in the shop.
I appreciate it, man.
No problem. Until next time, guys, if you guys listening and watching and you're watching the premiere, make sure you guys hit that like button. And also make sure you guys cop some merch as well. Make sure you guys are listening on all streaming platforms also. So until next time, we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.